In the fog-choked streets of 1889 London, a terrified woman seeks Sherlock Holmes, haunted by a mirror that casts a shadow with glowing red eyes. What begins as a ghostly mystery unravels into a sinister conspiracy, a secret society, a coded journal, and a plot to topple the realm. As Holmes and Watson chase shadows through docks and mirrored halls, they uncover a traitor's key hidden in plain sight. But is the mirror's secret just a trick, or does it guard a truth that could shatter an empire? One wrong step, and the shadows win. His words, though rational, did little to ease her tension or mine, for that matter. The room seemed to grow heavier as the night deepened, the air thick with an unnameable unease. Holmes, however, was undeterred. He drew the curtains, dimmed the lamps, and instructed us to sit in silence. "We shall wait," he said, settling into a chair with a view of the mirror. "If this shadow is punctual, we shall not be kept long." The hours crept by, marked only by the slow ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. The fire burned low, casting long shadows that danced upon the walls. I began to feel the weight of the silence, my nerves taut with anticipation. Miss Carroway sat rigid, her eyes never leaving the mirror. Holmes, by contrast, was a study in calm, his notebook open on his lap, his pencil sketching idly. At the stroke of midnight, a faint shimmer rippled across the mirror's surface. I stifled a gasp as a shadow emerged within the glass, not a reflection, but a distinct form, tall and cloaked, its face hidden beneath a hood. Its eyes glowed with a faint, ember-like red, unblinking and malevolent. It stood motionless, yet its presence seemed to fill the room with a palpable chill. Miss Carroway clutched my arm, her breath ragged. "It is there," she whispered. "Do you see it?" "I see it," I replied, my voice barely steady. My hand crept toward my revolver, though what use it could be against a specter, I could not say. Holmes, however, remained unmoved. He rose and approached the mirror, his eyes locked on the shadow. "Observe, Watson," he said softly. "It does not mimic our movements. It is independent, yet confined to the glass. A most ingenious effect." "Effect?" I exclaimed. "Holmes, it is. No mere trick of light." "Perhaps not," he said, his tone enigmatic. He raised a hand, as though to touch the glass, and the shadow recoiled, its eyes flaring brighter for a moment before it vanished, leaving the mirror dark and empty once more. Miss Carroway let out a sob of relief, her hands covering her face. I moved to comfort her, but Holmes's voice cut through the silence. "Enough for tonight," he said. "Miss Carroway, you will sleep elsewhere in the house. Watson and I shall remain here to keep watch." She nodded, too shaken to argue, and the butler escorted her from the room. I turned to Holmes, my mind awhirl with questions. "What was that thing?" I demanded. "You cannot tell me it was a mere illusion." Holmes's eyes glinted in the firelight. "I tell you nothing yet, Watson, but I will say this. There is no ghost so cunning that it cannot be unmasked by reason. We shall return to Baker Street at dawn, and I shall make inquiries. This mirror has a story, and I mean to learn it." The night passed without further incident, though I confess I slept little, my eyes fixed on the mirror, half expecting the shadow to reappear. Holmes, however, dozed lightly in his chair, his calm a stark contrast to my unease. At first light, we returned to Baker Street, where Holmes immediately set to work. He dispatched a flurry of telegrams, consulted his vast index of criminal records, and pored over a map of Prague. muttering to himself about antiquarian societies and occult relics. I busied myself with my notes, attempting to capture the events of the night, though words seemed inadequate to describe the chilling vision in the mirror. By midday, Holmes had uncovered a lead. The mirror, he said, was purchased by Mr. Carroway, from a dealer named Kerrol Novak, a man known for trafficking in artifacts of dubious origin. Novak is dead, but his associate, a certain Silas Vane, resides in London. I suspect he may know something of this shadow. Silas Vane, I said, a common enough name, but it stirs no memory. Nor should it, Holmes replied. He is a shadow himself, moving in the underbelly of London's antiquarian trade. We shall pay him a visit this evening under the guise of collectors. But first, Watson, we must examine those papers of Carroway's. They may hold the key to this mystery. Miss Carroway arrived shortly after, bearing a bundle of her father's papers. They were written in a dense, cryptic script, interspersed with diagrams of mirrors and strange symbols. Holmes's eyes lit up as he studied them. A cipher, he said, and not a simple one. A variant of the Vigenère, I believe, with a Polybius square overlay. It will take time to decode, but I wager it will reveal the mirror's true purpose. As he worked, I watched him, marveling at his composure in the face of the inexplicable. The shadow in the mirror had shaken me to my core, yet Holmes treated it as a puzzle, no different from a locked room murder or a stolen jewel. I could not help but wonder if his confidence was warranted, or if we were on the brink of confronting something beyond even his formidable intellect. The day wore on, and Holmes deciphered a portion of the papers, revealing references to a secret society known as the Order of the Saffron Veil. The name sent a chill through me, for it was whispered in certain circles as a group of fanatics obsessed with the occult, their rituals shrouded in secrecy. The papers hinted that the mirror was a relic of their order, used in ceremonies to commune with watchers beyond the veil. Holmes set the papers aside with a thoughtful hum. The order is long disbanded, he said, or so it is believed. Yet this shadow suggests otherwise. We are dealing with a carefully orchestrated deception, Watson, or something far stranger. As evening fell, we prepared to seek out Silas Vane. Holmes donned a disguiser, false beard and spectacles, transforming him into a nondescript scholar. I followed suit, feeling rather foolish in a borrowed wig, but trusting in Holmes's methods. Miss Carroway remained at Baker Street under Mrs. Hudson's care, her courage bolstered by Holmes's assurances. The fog had thickened once more, cloaking London in a ghostly shroud as we set out. Vane's lodgings were in Whitechapel, a warren of narrow streets and shadowed doorways. As we approached, a figure emerged from the meester tall man, cloaked and scarfed, his eyes hidden in the gloom. He pressed a note into my hand and vanished before I could speak. I unfolded the paper, my heart pounding. In a spidery hand, it read, "Cease your inquiries, or the shadow will claim you." Holmes snatched the note, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Our adversary is near," he said. "This paper is of a rare stock, used by a printer in Fleet Street. We shall trace it tomorrow. For now, let us proceed with caution." Vane's lodgings were a cramped, dimly lit room above a tavern, reeking of tobacco and stale ale. He was a wiry man with a pinched face and nervous eyes, his fingers stained with ink. He greeted us warily, but Holmes's assumed identity as a wealthy collector loosened his tongue. "The mirror," Vane said, his voice sharp. I sold it to Carroway, a fine piece, but no more than that. Why do you ask? Holmes's smile was thin. We have heard stories of shadows and whispers in the glass. Vane's face paled, and he glanced at the door. Stories, is it? I know nothing of such things. You'd best leave it be. Holmes pressed him, his voice soft but relentless. Come, Mr. Vane, you know more than you say. The Order of the Saffron Veil, perhaps, or a certain projector designed to cast spectral images. Vane bolted for the door, but Holmes was faster, seizing his arm. Speak, man, or you shall answer to the law. Vane's resistance crumbled. It was Novak's idea. He gasped. He built a device, hidden in the mirror's frame, a trick to frighten Carroway into selling the house. There's a fortune in gems hidden in the walls, and Novak wanted it. Holmes released him, his expression one of cold satisfaction. A trick, then. But who is behind Novak? Speak plainly. Vane shook his head. I don't know his name. A gentleman, cloaked, with a voice like ice. He paid Novak in gold, and me in threats. We left Vane trembling in his room, the note burning in my pocket. Holmes was silent as we returned to Baker Street, his mind racing ahead of my own. The shadow in the mirror was no ghost, but a mechanical illusion, yet the identity of the cloaked gentleman remained a mystery, one that Holmes was determined to unravel. As we sat by the fire once more, Holmes lit his pipe and gazed into the flames. The game is afoot, Watson, he said. A game of shadows and secrets, played by men who believe they can outwit the truth. They shall learn otherwise. I nodded, my thoughts still haunted by the glowing eyes in the mirror. The case had only begun, yet already it seemed to stretch beyond the bounds of reason. But with Sherlock Holmes at my side, I knew that no shadow, however cunning, could escape the light of his intellect. Chapter 1. The curious case begins. In the waning days of October 1889, London lay beneath a pall of fog so dense that the gas lamps of Baker Street flickered like stars struggling against a clouded sky. The air was thick with the scent of coal, smoke and damp earth, and the chill seeped through the windows of our modest lodgings at 2-1 B.I. Dr. John H. Watson sat by the fire, my pen idle upon a half-finished manuscript, my thoughts drifting to the quiet monotony that had settled over our lives in recent weeks. My friend and companion, Sherlock Holmes, reclined in his armchair, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin, his eyes fixed upon the swirling mist beyond the pane. His violin lay neglected across his knees, a sure sign of the restless ennui that gripped him when no case of sufficient intrigue presented itself. Holmes was not a man to suffer idleness lightly. His mind, a machine of relentless precision, craved the stimulus of a problem. The sharper and more perplexing, the better. I had grown accustomed to these moods, to the silences that could stretch for hours, broken only by the occasional sharp remark or the scrape of his bow across the strings. But on this evening, there was something different in his demeanor, undercurrent of anticipation, as though he sensed the approach of some unseen storm. Watson, said he, breaking the silence with a voice low and measured, have you ever pondered the nature of a mirror? Not as a mere tool for vanity, but as a window to truths that lie beyond the visible. I looked up, startled by the question. Holmes's inquiries often carried a weight that belied their apparent simplicity, and I sensed this was no idle musing. A mirror, I replied, setting aside my pen. I suppose it reflects what is before it, light form, perhaps a glimpse of one's own soul, if one is inclined to poetry. Holmes's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. though his eyes remained fixed on the window. Poetry, Watson. No, I speak of something more tangible. A mirror captures the world, but it inverts it, distorts it. What if it could show us not just what is, but what was or what might be? I confess I found his words enigmatic, even for him. Before I could press for clarification, a sharp rap at the door shattered the stillness. Mrs. Hudson, our steadfast landlady, entered, her face betraying a mixture of curiosity and concern. "A lady to see you, Mr. Holmes," she said. "She seems in quite a state." "Show her in," Holmes replied, rising with a sudden energy that belied his earlier languor. He set the violin aside and turned to face the door, his lean frame taut with expectation. The woman who entered was young, perhaps 25, with a delicate beauty marred by an expression of profound distress. Her auburn hair was pinned beneath a modest bonnet, and her green eyes darted nervously about the room, as though seeking some unseen threat. Her hands, gloved in black, clutched a small reticule with a grip so tight that her knuckles showed white through the fabric. She hesitated at the threshold, then stepped forward, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I am Eliza Carroway. I beg your assistance, for I fear I am pursued by a terror I cannot comprehend." Holmes gestured to a chair, his manner calm but commanding. "Pray, be seated, Miss Carroway. Compose yourself and tell us everything, omitting no detail, however trivial it may seem." She sank into the chair, her breath coming in short, uneven gasps. I poured her a glass of brandy from the decanter, which she accepted with a grateful nod, though her hand shook as she raised it to her lips. After a moment, she began her tale, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "I live alone in my late father's house in Kensington," she said. "He was an antiquarian, a collector of rare objects, and it is one of these objects that has brought me here. In his study, there hangs a mirror, an old, heavy thing, brought from Prague some years ago. For the past fortnight, I have seen something in it. A shadow, a figure not my own. It appears only at night, and it watches me with eyes that burn like fire. I fear it means me harm." Holmes leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with that peculiar intensity that marked his interest in a case. "Describe this shadow, Miss Carroway. Every particular, if you please." "It is tall," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Cloaked, hooded, its face obscured, save for those eyes red, glowing like embers in the dark. It does not move as a reflection should. When I turn away, it lingers. When I approach, it seems to retreat, yet it never leaves the glass. Last night, I heard a sound, a low, guttural whisper, though I could not discern the words. I locked the study door and have not returned since." I glanced at Holmes, expecting perhaps a skeptical remark, for he was no believer in the supernatural. But his expression was one of keen fascination, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of his chair. "A shadow that defies the laws of reflection," he murmured. "Most singular. Tell me, Miss Carroway, was your father involved in any unusual pursuits? Did he speak of this mirror's origins?" She shook her head. "Father was secretive about his acquisitions. He said only that the mirror came from a collector in Prague, a man with a reputation for dealing in objects of questionable provenance. After his death last year, I found papers in his study, but they are written in a code I cannot decipher." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Papers, you say? We shall examine them. Watson, your revolver, bring it." Miss Carroway We shall accompany you to Kensington at once. The hour is late, but the fog will conceal our movements. I retrieved my service Jesus revolver from my desk, my mind racing with questions. A spectral figure in a mirror. It seemed the stuff of ghost stories, yet Holmes's demeanor suggested he took the matter seriously. As we prepared to leave, he turned to Miss Carroway with a final question. Has anyone else seen this shadow or expressed interest in the mirror? No one, she replied. The servants refuse to enter the study at night. They say the house is cursed. Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. A curse is but a name for fear of the unknown. We shall see what truths this mirror holds. The journey to Kensington was a silent one, the fog muffling the clatter of our hansom cab as it wound through the darkened streets. Miss Carroway sat opposite us, her face pale in the dim light of the cab's lantern, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Holmes stared out into the mist, his profile sharp and hawk-like, lost in thought. I wondered what theories were forming in that remarkable mind, but I knew better than to interrupt his reverie. The Carroway residence stood at the end of a quiet street, its tall windows like blind eyes in the fog. The house was grand but somber, its Georgian facade weathered by time and neglect. A butler, an elderly man with a stooped posture, admitted us, his eyes flickering with unease as he led us to the study. The room was a scholar's sanctum, lined with bookshelves groaning under the weight of leather-bound tomes. A massive oak desk stood at one end, strewn with papers and curiosities of recarvings, a brass astrolabe, a collection of ancient coins. Above the mantel hung the mirror, its heavy gilt frame carved with grotesque figures, their twisted faces seeming to leer in the firelight. The glass itself was dark, almost opaque, as though it absorbed rather than reflected the light. Holmes approached the mirror with his customary deliberation, his long fingers tracing the edges of the frame. He tapped the glass, producing a dull, hollow sound, and examined the carvings with a pocket lens. The frame is old, he said, but the glass is newer, perhaps a replacement. The chill of it is curious far colder than the room. I touched the glass myself and found it indeed unnaturally cold, as though it had been plunged into ice. Miss Carroway stood by the door, her eyes fixed on the mirror with a mixture of dread and fascination. Does it feel wrong to you, Mr. Holmes? She asked. Wrong, he replied, raising an eyebrow. It feels like glass, Miss Carroway, albeit unusually dense. The wrongness lies not in the object, but in the mind of the observer. Fear can paint shadows where none exist. Chapter 2. The house in Kensington. The fog that clung to London's streets on that October night of 1889 seemed to thicken as our hansom cab rattled toward Kensington, as though the city itself conspired to shroud the mystery we pursued. Sherlock Holmes sat beside me, his sharp profile etched against the dim glow of the cab's lantern, his eyes fixed on some unseen horizon. Miss Eliza Carroway, our distressed client, huddled opposite us, her face pale and her hands clasped tightly. In her lap, the weight of her fear palpable in the confined space. I, Dr. John Watson, felt my own nerves taut, the memory of her tales a shadow in the mirror with its ember-like eye-stirring and unease. I could not wholly dismiss. Holmes, however, betrayed no such disquiet. His silence was not one of apprehension, but of calculation, his mind already dissecting the problem with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. As the cab slowed, he spoke at last, his voice low and deliberate. Watson, observe the streets as we approach. Note any signs of surveillance, loiterers, unusual lights, or marks of passage. Our adversary, whoever he may be, is unlikely to leave Miss Carroway unwatched. I nodded, peering through the cab's window into the swirling mist. The streets of Kensington were quiet, the grand houses looming like silent sentinels, their windows dark save for the occasional flicker of gaslight. I saw no figures lurking, no telltale signs of pursuit, but the fog was a cunning ally to any who wished to remain unseen. We alighted before the Carroway residence, a stately Georgian edifice that stood at the end of a tree-lined avenue. Its facade was imposing, with tall columns flanking the entrance, but time had weathered its stone, and the ivy that clung to its walls gave it an air of melancholy neglect. The butler, a stooped figure named Grayson, greeted us with a deferential bow, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as he glanced at Miss Carroway. "Show us to the study, Grayson," she said, her voice steadier now, bolstered perhaps by Holmes's presence, "and see that we are not disturbed." The butler led us through a dimly lit hall, its walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, whose eyes seemed to follow our progress. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax, and the silence of the house was broken only by the creak of floorboards beneath our feet. We reached the study, a spacious room dominated by a massive oak desk and shelves laden with books and curiosities. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Above the mantel hung the object of our inquiry, the mirror. It was a formidable piece, its gilt frame intricately carved with figures that seemed to writhe in the flickering light, grotesque cherubs, serpents, and masked faces frozen in expressions of silent menace. The glass itself was dark, almost opaque, as though it absorbed the light rather than reflected it. I approached it cautiously, my reflection distorted by its uneven surface, and found it unnaturally cold to the touch, as though it had been plucked from a winter's night. Holmes wasted no time. He drew a small notebook from his pocket and began a meticulous examination, his long fingers tracing the frame's carvings, his pocket lens glinting as he studied every detail. "The frame is of Bohemian craftsmanship," he murmured, "likely 17th century, but the glass is new, a decade old. The chill is curious, Watson. Glass does not retain cold in this manner unless influenced by some external factor." He tapped the mirror's surface, producing a low, resonant hum, and sniffed the air about it, his brow furrowing slightly. "No trace of chemicals, yet the air feels heavy. Miss Carroway, has this mirror been cleaned or altered since your father's death?" "Never," she replied, standing near the door, her eyes fixed on the glass with a mixture of dread and fascination. "The servants refuse to touch it. They say it brings ill luck." Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Superstition is the refuge of the ignorant. Yet their reluctance may have preserved evidence." Watson examined the floor beneath the mirror. "Look for scratches, dust patterns, anything that suggests tampering." I knelt, peering at the polished floorboards. A thin layer of dust had settled, disturbed only by faint scuff marks near the mantel, as though someone had stood there recently. "There are marks here," I said, "but they could belong to anyone's servants. Miss Carroway herself." Holmes nodded, his attention still on the mirror. He produced a small vial of powder from his coat and dusted it lightly along the frame's edges, revealing a faint smudge of fingerprint, perhaps though too indistinct to be certain. "Someone has handled this recently," he said, "and not with the care of a servant polishing silver. Miss Carroway, who has access to this room? Only Grayson and the housemaid, Mary, she replied. And myself, of course. The other servants avoid it, especially at night. Holmes made a note, then turned to the desk, where a clutter of papers, books, and artifacts lay in disarray. He sifted through them with practiced ease, his eyes scanning for anything of significance. Among the items was a small leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed and filled with a cramped, cryptic script. "Your father's?" he asked. She nodded. "One of many. He was always writing, though I could never read his notes. He used a code, even for mundane matters." Holmes's eyes gleamed with interest. A man who guards his thoughts so carefully has secrets worth guarding. "We shall take this with us. But first, we must witness this shadow for ourselves." He instructed Miss Carroway to extinguish all but one lamp, plunging the room into near darkness. The fire's glow cast eerie shadows, and the mirror seemed to loom larger in the dim light, its carved figures almost alive in their contortions. We took our places, Holmes in a chair facing the mirror, myself beside him with my revolver at hand, and Miss Carroway near the door, her breath uneven but her resolve holding. The hours crept by, the silence broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock and the occasional crackle of the fire. I found my eyes drawn to the mirror, its dark surface seeming to pulse with a life of its own. Holmes, by contrast, was a study in patience, his notebook open, his pencil sketching idly as he watched the glass with unblinking intensity. At precisely midnight, a faint shimmer rippled across the mirror's surface, like moonlight on a disturbed pond. My heart quickened as a form began to take shape within the glass knot. A reflection, but a distinct entity, tall and cloaked, its face hidden beneath a hood. Its eyes glowed with a faint, malevolent red, like coals smouldering in a dying fire. The figure stood motionless, yet its presence filled the room with a palpable chill, as though the air itself had turned to ice. Miss Carroway stifled a cry, her hand clutching the doorframe. I gripped my revolver, though I knew it was useless against such a specter. Holmes, however, remained calm, his pencil moving swiftly as he sketched the figure's outline. "Observe, Watson," he whispered, his voice steady. "It does not mirror our movements. It is independent, yet bound to thee. Glass, a most remarkable phenomenon, I hissed, my voice low. "Holmes, it is no trick of light, it is unnatural." "Nothing is unnatural," he replied, his eyes never leaving the mirror, merely unexplained. Note the eye's phosphorescence, perhaps, or a chemical reaction. And the cloak its folds suggest a projection, not a solid form. He rose, moving closer to the mirror, his hand outstretched as though to touch the glass. The shadow recoiled, its eyes flaring brighter for a moment before it vanished, leaving the mirror dark and empty once more. The room seemed to exhale, the oppressive weight lifting. Though my pulse still raced, Miss Carroway sank into a chair, her face ashen. "It was there," she whispered. "You saw it. It is real. It is visible," Holmes corrected, returning to his seat. "Whether it is real remains to be seen." Watson checked the window and door. "Ensure we are alone." I complied, finding the window locked and the door undisturbed. The room was sealed, yet the shadow had appeared, defying all logic. Holmes, undeterred, continued his examination, tapping the mirror's frame once more and inspecting the mantel for hidden mechanisms. He found nothing, but his expression was one of quiet satisfaction. as though the absence of evidence was itself a clue. "Miss Carroway," he said at last, "you will not sleep in this house tonight. Arrange for a room at a nearby hotel under Grayson's escort. Watson and I shall remain here until dawn. I suspect our shadow prefers an audience, and we shall not disappoint it." She hesitated, then nodded, her trust in Holmes overriding her fear. Grayson was summoned, and she departed with him, leaving us alone in the study. The fire had burned low, and the room grew colder, the mirror looming like a silent sentinel. Holmes settled back into his chair, his pipe lit, its smoke curling toward the ceiling. "What are your thoughts, Watson?" he asked, his tone almost conversational. "I hardly know," I admitted. "A projection, you say, but how? And why? If this is a trick, it is one of fiendish ingenuity." "Fiendish, perhaps," he said, "but human. No ghost leaves fingerprints, Watson, nor employs coded journals. This shadow is a tool wielded by a hand that seeks to frighten Miss Carroway. The question is, to what end?" He fell silent, his eyes fixed on the mirror, and I knew his mind was racing through possibilities, each thread of evidence woven into a tapestry only he could see. I took up my post by the window, my revolver at hand, though I felt increasingly foolish for relying on it. The night stretched on, the clocks ticking a steady counterpoint to my thoughts. As dawn approached, the mirror remained dark, its secrets unyielded. Holmes rose, stretching his limbs with a cat-like grace. "We have seen enough, for now," he said. "The journal will tell us more, and I have inquiries to make. Return to Baker Street, Watson, and rest. I shall join you presently." We left the house as the first light of morning pierced the fog, the streets stirring with the sounds of early vendors and delivery carts. Holmes was silent as we rode back, but his eyes gleamed with the fire of a man who had found his quarry. The shadow in the mirror was no mere specter, but a puzzle, and Sherlock Holmes was never more alive than when unraveling such mysteries. Back at Baker Street, I collapsed into my chair, exhausted but restless. Holmes, however, was already at work, the journal open before him, his fingers tracing the cryptic script. "The game is afoot, Watson," he said, his voice alight with anticipation. "And it is a game of shadows, played by men who believe they can outwit the light. They shall find otherwise." I nodded, my thoughts still haunted by those glowing eyes in the glass. The case of the Baker Street mirror had only begun, but already it promised to test even Holmes's formidable intellect. As I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I could not shake the feeling that we stood on the edge of something vast and dark, a mystery that would challenge the very boundaries of reason. Chapter 3. A trail of clues. A morning following our vigil in the Carroway residence broke with a pale, reluctant sun, its light struggling through the ever-present London fog. At 221B Baker Street, the air was thick with the scent of tobacco, and the faint tang of chemicals, for Sherlock Holmes had already begun his work when I descended from my room. He sat at the cluttered table, his lean frame bent over the late Mr. Carroway's journal, its cryptic pages spread before him like a map to some hidden realm. Beside him lay a stack of telegrams, their edges curling, and his index of criminal records, a vast compendium of London's underbelly, open to a welcomed page. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, darted across the script, his fingers occasionally pausing to scribble a note or consult a cipher key scratched on a scrap of paper. I, Dr. John Watson, had slept fitfully, the memory of the shadow in the mirror lingering like a fever dream. Yet Holmes seemed invigorated, his restless mind thriving on the puzzle before us. "Good morning, Watson," he said without looking up, his voice brisk. You have missed little. The journal is proving a formidable adversary, but I have cracked its outer defenses. Tea. I poured myself a cup from the pot Mrs. Hudson had left, its warmth a small comfort against the chill of the morning. What have you found? I asked, settling into my chair. Is it the Order of the Saffron Veil? Holmes's lips twitched. In a faint smile, though his attention remained fixed on the journal. Patience, my dear Watson. The cipher is a hybrid Vigenère base overlaid with a Polybius square, spiced with alchemical symbols for good measure. Carroway was no mere antiquarian. He was a man of secrets, and this journal guards them jealously. He turned a page, revealing a diagram of a mirror, its frame adorned with the same grotesque carvings we had seen in Kensington. Beside it were notes in a spidery hand, interspersed with symbols I could not decipher. The mirror, Holmes continued, is mentioned repeatedly, not as a mere object, but as a conduit. The Order of the Saffron Veil believed it could bridge worlds, though I suspect their mysticism cloaks a more prosaic purpose. Worlds, I said, my skepticism rising. Surely you don't credit such nonsense, Holmes. He glanced at me, his grey eyes gleaming with amusement. I credit only what the evidence supports. But consider a mirror that frightens its owner, a coded journal, a secret society. These are not the trappings of a simple hoax. There is intent here, and I mean to uncover it. He rose, pacing the room with the restless energy of a hound on the scent. I have sent telegrams to contacts in Prague and Berlin, inquiring about Karel Novak and his dealings. I have also requested Inspector Lestrade to investigate Silas Vane's movements. The note you received last night, its paper, is a rare stock, used by a printer in Fleet Street known for discreet commissions. We shall visit him this afternoon. But first, we must decipher more of this journal. He handed me a sheet of paper covered in his neat, angular handwriting, a partial translation of the journal's contents. The text spoke of the mirrors. Acquisition from Novak, who claimed it had been crafted for a Bohemian noble in the 17th century, a man rumored to be a member of the Order. The mirror, it seemed, was no ordinary looking glass, but a relic imbued with significance, used in rituals to summon a watcher from beyond. The words sent a chill through me, recalling the shadow's glowing eyes. Holmes noticed my expression and chuckled. A watcher, Watson, is likely a metaphor, a code for something tangible. The Order was known for its theatricality, using fear to manipulate. But the journal hints at a more practical motive. See here, he pointed to a passage. The conduit hides the wealth of kings, guarded by the watcher's gaze. Wealth, I said. You think this is about money? Money, power, or secrets? Holmes replied. The three are often interchangeable. Carroway's house in Kensington is old, its walls thick. A fortune could be concealed there, gems, gold, or documents of value. The shadow is a device to drive Miss Carroway away, leaving the house vulnerable. I nodded, the pieces beginning to align. And Vane. Is he the mastermind? Holmes shook his head. Vane is a pawn, Watson. His fear last night was genuine. The cloaked gentleman, he spoke of the one with a voice like ice's our true quarry. But we shall deal with Vane in due course. By noon, Holmes had deciphered enough of the journal to confirm the mirror's origin in Prague. Purchased from Novak in 1885, the dealer's notes, buried in the cipher, suggested the mirror had been part of a larger collection, including papers and artifacts linked to the Order. These papers, now in Miss Carroway's possession, were likely the key to the shadow's purpose. Holmes dispatched a boy to summon Miss Carroway, who arrived shortly after, her face still pale but her resolve strengthened. She brought a second, a bundle of her father's papers, these less cryptic but no less intriguing. They included letters from Novak, written in a florid hand, warning Carroway of the mirror's peculiar properties and urging him to keep it hidden. One letter mentioned a debt owed to a third party, unnamed but described as a man of uncommon influence. Holmes read the letters with keen interest, his fingers drumming on the table. Novak was no mere dealer, he said. He was a broker of secrets, and this mirror was his currency. Miss Carroway, have you ever heard your father speak of a man called the Magister? She shook her head, her eyes wide. No, never. Who is he? A shadow within a shadow, Holmes replied cryptically. The Order of the Saffron Veil had a leader, known only by that title. He was said to be a master of deception, orchestrating schemes from the continent to London. If he is involved, our case grows more dangerous. He turned to me, his expression grave. Watson, we must act swiftly. The printer in Fleet Street awaits, and I suspect he will lead us to Vane's employer. Prepare yourself for a journey into London's less savoury quarters. The afternoon found us in Fleet Street, where the air buzzed with the clatter of printing presses and the shouts of newsboys. The printer, a wiry man named Hodges, operated from a cramped shop tucked between a tavern and a bookseller's. His eyes narrowed as Holmes, still in his scholar's disguise, inquired about the rare paper stock. Hodges was evasive, claiming ignorance, but a sovereign and Holmes's quiet intensity loosened his tongue. The paper came from a private order, he admitted, wiping ink-stained hands on his apron. A gentleman, cloaked, paid well to keep it quiet. He wanted notes, printed warnings, I think. I didn't ask questions. Holmes pressed him for a description, but Hodges could offer little. The man was tall, his voice low and cold, his face obscured by a scarf. It matched Vane's account, confirming our suspicions of a single mastermind. Hodges provided an address in Whitechapel where the paper had been delivered at. Derelict warehouse known to shelter unsavory types. As we left the shop, Holmes's mood was one of quiet triumph. The net tightens, Watson, he said. Our cloaked gentleman is careless, leaving such a trail. But we must tread carefully. He is no ordinary criminal. Our next stop was Whitechapel, where the fog hung thickest. The streets alive with the clamour of hawkers and the stench of refuse. The warehouse was a crumbling relic, its windows boarded, its walls stained with soot. Holmes circled it, his eyes scanning for signs of entry. A side door, half hidden by crates, bore fresh scratches around the lock, evidence of recent use. Inside, the air was damp and heavy, the floor littered with debris. Holmes moved with the stealth of a cat, his lantern casting long shadows. We found traces of occupation, a discarded cigarette, a scrap of the same rare paper, and, most curiously, a small vial of luminescent powder, its glow faint but unmistakable. Phosphorescence, Holmes said, holding the vial to the light. The source of our shadow's eyes, perhaps. This is no supernatural specter, Watson, but a carefully crafted illusion. He pocketed the vial and continued his search, uncovering a hidden panel in the wall. Behind it lay a bundle of letters, written in the same spidery hand as the warning note. They were addressed to Vane, instructing him to frighten Miss Carroway and secure the mirror. The signature was a single initial, M. The Magister, Holmes murmured, his eyes alight. He moves through proxies, but his hand is clear. These letters mention a meeting at the docks tomorrow night. We shall be there. We left the warehouse as dusk fell, the fog swallowing our footsteps. Holmes was silent, his mind racing ahead, but I sensed a growing complexity in the case. The shadow was a trick, yet its purpose remained elusive. Was it merely to scare Miss Carroway, or was there a deeper game at play? Back at Baker Street, Holmes resumed his study of the journal, his pipe sending clouds of smoke toward the ceiling. "The mirror is a key," he said at last, "not to another world, but to a Fortunora secret. The Order's rituals were a facade. Watson, a means to guard something tangible. Tomorrow we shall learn more." I nodded, my thoughts troubled. The shadow in the mirror had been unmasked as an illusion, yet the menace behind it was all too real. As I retired for the night, the glowing eyes haunted my dreams, a reminder that even in Holmes's world of reason, some shadows cast a darkness reason alone could not dispel. Chapter 4. The Man in the Fog Fur, evening of October 1889. Following our discoveries in Whitechapel, found London wrapped in a fog so dense it seemed to choke the very life from the city. The gas lamps of Baker Street cast feeble halos, barely piercing the miasma that swirled about our lodgings at 2-1B. Inside, Sherlock Holmes was a study in restless energy, his lean form pacing before the fire, his pipe sending tendrils of smoke to mingle with the shadows. I, Dr. John Watson, sat at the table, my notes before me, attempting to impose order on the chaos of our investigation. The shadow in the mirror, the cryptic journal, the luminescent powder, and the mysterious figure known only as M, each was a thread in a tapestry that grew ever more intricate. Holmes paused, his grey eyes glinting as he turned to me. "Watson, we are on the cusp of a revelation. The meeting at the docks, mentioned in those letters, is our chance to glimpse the hand behind this charade. The Magister, or his agent, will be there. We must be prepared for anything. Prepared," I said, my hands straying to the revolver in my pocket. "Holmes, we face a man who conjures specters in mirrors and sends warnings in the night. What manner of adversary is this?" Holmes's lips curved in a wry smile. "A clever one, Watson, but not infallible. His tricks rely on fear, and fear is a poor shield against reason. Tonight, we shall turn his own shadows against him." He resumed his pacing, outlining our plan. We would infiltrate the docks under cover of darkness, disguised as dock workers, and observe the meeting from a vantage point. Holmes had already enlisted the aid of Wiggins, the leader of his irregular band of street urchins, to scout the area and report any suspicious movements. The warehouse in Whitechapel had yielded the time and place midnight at a derelict pier near Wapping but little else about the nature of the rendezvous. As the clock struck 9, we donned our disguises, rough jackets, caps pulled low, and faces smudged with soot to blend with the dockside rabble. Holmes's transformation was uncanny. His refined features vanished beneath a slouch and a coarse accent, while I felt merely awkward, my military bearing ill-suited to the role of a labourer. We left Baker Street in silence, the fog muffling our footsteps as we made our way to the River Dot. The docks at Wapping were a labyrinth of crates, ropes, and rusted machinery, the air thick with the stench of tar and rotting fish. The Thames lapped sluggishly against the piers, its waters black and uninviting. The fog was both ally and foe, concealing us but obscuring our quarry. Holmes led the way with unerring instinct, his lantern dimmed to a faint glow. Wiggins met us near a stack of barrels, his sharp eyes gleaming with excitement. "2 men, sir," he whispered, "one's vain, t'other ess, a gent, cloaked like. There by the old pier token low, Got a crate with M covered in canvas. Holmes nodded, slipping the boy a coin. Good work, Wiggins. Stay out of sight, but keep watch. If they move, follow at a distance. We crept closer, using the crates for cover. The fog parted briefly, revealing two figures near the pier's edge. Silas Vane, his wiry frame unmistakable, gestured nervously, his voice a low murmur. Beside him stood a taller man, cloaked and scarfed, his posture commanding despite the obscurity of his face. A large crate, draped in canvas, stood between them, its contents hidden. Holmes motioned for silence, his ears straining to catch their words. I caught fragments. The mirror must be secured, and the Magister will not tolerate failure. But the fog and the river's hum drowned out the rest. Holmes's eyes narrowed, his hand sketching quick notes in his pocketbook. Suddenly, the cloaked man stiffened, as though sensing our presence. He turned, his scarf slipping to reveal a glimpse of a pale, angular face, his eyes hidden in shadow. Before I could react, he seized Vane's arm and pulled him toward the crate, barking a command. Vane fumbled with the canvas, revealing a glint of glass, the mirror from Kensington, its carved frame unmistakable. Holmes whispered, "They mean to move it. We cannot let it leave the docks." He signaled to advance, but the fog betrayed us. A loose plank creaked under my foot, and the cloaked man's head snapped toward us. "Who's there?" he growled, his voice low and cold, like ice sliding over. Stone Holmes stepped forward, shedding his disguise with a casual flick of his cap. "Merely passers-by, sir," he said, his tone deceptively mild. "But I confess an interest in your crate. A fine mirror, is it not?" Vane paled, his eyes darting to the cloaked man, who drew himself up, his hand slipping beneath his cloak. "You meddle in matters beyond you," he said. "Leave now, or regret it." Holmes's smile was thin. "I am Sherlock Holmes, and I regret little. You, however, may regret your association with the Order of the Saffron Veil." The name struck like a spark. Vane flinched, but the cloaked man laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Holmes," he said, "your reputation precedes you, but you are out. Of your depth, the mirror is mine, and its secrets with it." He drew a pistol, its barrel gleaming in the lantern light. I raised my revolver, but Holmes stayed my hand. "No need for violence," he said. "Tell me, sir, what does the Magister seek? Gems, documents, or something less tangible?" The man's eyes narrowed, but before he could reply, a shout echoed from the dock's edge. Wiggins, bless his reckless heart, had tripped and alarm a stack of crates, toppling with a crash. The cloaked man cursed, firing a shot into the fog, and seized the mirror, dragging it toward a waiting boat. Vane hesitated, then followed, his fear outweighing his loyalty. Holmes sprang forward, his agility belying his scholarly frame. I followed, my heart pounding as we gave chase through the fog. The boat, a small skiff, was already pulling away, the mirror's frame glinting as it vanished into the mist. Holmes halted at the pier's edge, his breath sharp and controlled. "They escape for now," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "But they have left us a gift." He pointed to the ground, where a torn scrap of paper lay, dropped in the cloaked man's haste. It bore a single word: Ashbourne. Holmes pocketed it, his eyes alight with triumph. "Lord Reginald Ashbourne," he said, "a name from Carroway's papers, a reclusive peer with a taste for the occult. He is our Magister, or I am much mistaken." We returned to Baker Street, the fog closing around us like a curtain. Holmes was silent, his mind racing through the implications of our discovery. At 2-1B, he spread the journal and letters before him, cross-referencing the name Ashbourne. A passage in the journal, newly deciphered, confirmed his suspicion. Ashbourne had been a patron of the order, funding its rituals and seeking the mirror for reasons unspecified. "The mirror is a distraction," Holmes said, lighting his pipe. "Its shadow is a tool to frighten. But the true prize lies elsewhere, perhaps in Carroway's house, perhaps in the documents themselves. Ashbourne is no mere collector. He plays a deeper game." I nodded, my thoughts troubled by the cloaked man's cold assurance and the meeting at the docks. "Why move the mirror now?" "To protect it," Holmes replied, "or to use it. Ashbourne believes it holds power, whether mystical or practical. We must find it before he employs it further." As midnight approached, Holmes dispatched a telegram to Lestrade, requesting surveillance on Ashbourne's London residence. He also sent Wiggins to scout the docks for traces of the skiff. For my part, I felt the weight of the night's events. The cloaked man's pistol, a stark reminder of the danger we faced. Holmes, however, was undeterred. "The fog hides much, Watson," he said, his eyes fixed on the fire, "but it cannot hide the truth from us. Tomorrow, we shall visit Ashbourne's townhouse and see what shadows lurk within his walls." I retired to bed, my dreams haunted by the mirror's glowing eyes and the cloaked figure's icy voice. The case was growing darker, its threads weaving a pattern I could not yet discern. But with Sherlock Holmes at my side, I knew that no fog, however thick, could conceal the truth for long. Chapter 5. The trap is set. The dawn of the following day broke with a sullen grey light, the fog of London thinning to a haze that clung to the rooftops like a lingering ghost. At 2-1B Baker Street, the air was sharp with the scent of coffee and the acrid bite of Holmes's chemical experiments. For he had been awake since our return from the docks, his mind a furnace of restless deduction. I, Dr. John Watson, found him at the table, surrounded by papers, vials, and the ever-present journal of the late Mr. Carroway, its cryptic pages yielding slowly to his relentless scrutiny. The name Ashbourne, scrawled on the scrap of paper, dropped at the docks, lay at the heart of his focus, a beacon in the murky sea of our investigation. Holmes glanced up as I entered, his grey eyes bright with the fire of pursuit. "Good morning, Watson," he said, his voice brisk despite the sleepless night. "We stand at a crossroads. Lord Reginald Ashbourne is no mere collector of curiosities. He is a player in a game of high stakes. The mirror, the shadow, the order of the Saffron Veil are pieces in his design. Today, we shall draw him into the open." "How?" I asked, pouring coffee and settling into my chair. "He has the mirror, and we have little but a name and a suspicion." Holmes's lips curved in a thin, predatory smile. "Suspicion is a spark, Watson, and we shall fan it into a blaze. Ashbourne believes the mirror holds a secret, whether mystical or material, it matters not. We shall use his belief against him. I propose a trap, baited with the very object he covets." He outlined his plan with the precision of a general plotting a campaign. Miss Eliza Carroway would announce a public auction of her father's artifacts, including a mirror described in terms that would unmistakably point to the one stolen from the docks. The announcement would be placed in the evening papers, worded to attract the attention of collectors, occultists, and, most importantly, Ashbourne or his agents. The auction would be held in a hired hall in Bloomsbury, under the watchful eyes of Holmes, myself, and Inspector Lestrade's men, who would be alerted to the scheme. If Ashbourne is the Magister, Holmes said, he will not resist the chance to reclaim the mirror, or to ensure it does not fall into other hands. If he sends another vein perhaps, or the cloaked man, we shall have them. Either way, we force his hand. I nodded, impressed by the elegance of the plan, though a shadow of doubt lingered. And if the mirror's secret is not what he seeks, what if this is about something else entirely? Holmes's eyes narrowed. Then we shall learn what it is. The journal speaks of wealth guarded by the watcher's gaze. I suspect a hidden cache in Carroway's house gems, documents, or perhaps something of political consequence. Ashbourne's desperation suggests a prize worth killing for. He turned to the journal, pointing to a newly deciphered passage. The conduit opens only to the initiated, its key hidden in plain sight. This suggests a mechanism, Watson. Perhaps within the mirror itself or the house. We must examine both more closely after the auction. As we prepared, Miss Carroway arrived, summoned by a telegram Holmes had sent at first light. She was pale but resolute, her fear tempered by trust in Holmes's abilities. When he explained the auction plan, her eyes widened, but she agreed without hesitation. If it will end this nightmare, she said, I will do whatever you ask. Holmes instructed her to draft the announcement, describing the mirror as a rare Bohemian relic, reputed to possess singular properties from the collection of the late Mr. Carroway. The vagueness was deliberate, designed to intrigue without revealing too much. He also advised her to remain at a hotel under an assumed name, guarded by one of Lestrade's constables, until the auction was complete. By noon, the announcement was placed with the editors of the Times and the Evening Standard, set to appear in the late editions. Holmes then turned his attention to the journal, decoding another fragment that hinted at a hidden compartment in Carroway's study, possibly linked to the mirror's frame. We shall return to Kensington tonight, he said, after the papers are distributed. If Ashbourne takes the bait, he may attempt to search the house before the auction. The afternoon was spent in preparation. Holmes donned a new disguiser, portly auctioneer with a florid wig and spectacles, while I was tasked with coordinating with Lestrade, who arrived at Baker Street with his usual blend of skepticism and grudging respect. A ghost in a mirror. Holmes, he said, scratching his chin. You'll have me chasing shadows next. Not a ghost, Lestrade, Holmes replied, adjusting his wig with a flourish. A projection and a human hand behind it. Be at the hall tomorrow evening. With your best men. We shall have our quarry. Lestrade nodded, though his eyes betrayed doubt. I hope you're right, Holmes. This Ashbourne's a lord, you know, not the sort to take kindly to being nabbed. Then he should not play at crime, Holmes said sharply. See to your men and leave the rest to me. As evening fell, we returned to Kensington, the fog once more our cloak. The Carroway residence was silent, its windows dark, save for a single lamp in the hall. Grayson, the butler, admitted us, his face a mask of unease. Miss Carroway is at the hotel, sir, he said. The house feels wrong without her. Holmes dismissed his concerns with a wave. Wrongness is a matter of perception, Grayson. Show us to the study. The room was as we had left it, the mirror looming above the mantel, its carved figures seeming to shift in the flickering light. Holmes resumed his examination, focusing on the frame's lower edge, where he suspected a hidden mechanism. His fingers probed the carvings, pressing and twisting until a faint click echoed through the room. A small panel sprang open, revealing a narrow compartment within the frame. Inside lay a folded parchment, its edges brittle with age. Holmes unfolded it with care, revealing a diagram of the study, marked with an X near the fireplace. Below, it was a single line. The watcher guards the heart of the veil. He studied it intently, his eyes gleaming. A map, Watson. The wealth is here, in this room, concealed within or behind the fireplace. We turned to the hearth, its stones blackened by years of use. Holmes tapped each one, listening for hollow sounds, and soon found a loose slab near the base. With a gentle push, it slid aside, revealing a cavity containing a small iron box. Inside were no gems or gold, but a collection of letters, sealed with a wax emblem, saffron flower. Holmes's face tightened as he examined them. Correspondence, he said. Not mere letters, but directives, written in a cipher similar to the journal. These are orders from the Order of the Saffron Veil, addressed to Carroway. He was no mere collector. Watson was one of their operatives. Before I could respond, a creak from the hall snapped us to attention. Holmes doused the lamp, plunging the room into darkness, and we crouched behind the desk. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate, and a figure entered. A man, cloaked, his face obscured by a scarf. It was the same man from the docks, his movements cautious but purposeful. He approached the mirror, his hands tracing its frame as though searching for the same compartment we had found. Holmes sprang forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "Good evening, sir. You seek what we have already claimed." The man spun, a knife glinting in his hand, but Holmes was faster, disarming him with a swift blow to the wrist. I leveled my revolver, my heart pounding. "Who are you?" I demanded. The man laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You think you've won, Holmes. The Magister sees all. The mirror is but a step, and you are too late." He lunged for the door, but Holmes tackled him, pinning him to the floor. Lestrade's men, alerted by a prearranged signal, burst in, handcuffs at the ready. The man struggled, but his strength failed against their numbers. As they dragged him away, Holmes retrieved the Nefer-curved blade with a saffron emblem etched into its hilt. "Ashbourne's agent," Holmes said, examining the weapon. "But not the Magister himself. This man is a hired hand, likely unaware of the full game. The letters, Watson, they are the key." We returned to Baker Street with the iron box, the fog closing around us once more. Holmes was silent, his mind racing through the implications of our find. The auction was set for the following evening, and with it, the chance to confront Ashbourne. But the letters suggested a deeper plot, one that reached beyond a mere fortune or a mystical relic. As I settled by the fire, Holmes opened the box, spreading the letters before him. "The order is not dead," he said softly. "It lives, and Ashbourne is its heart. Tomorrow we shall spring our trap, but we must be ready for a counterstroke. The Magister will not yield easily." I nodded, my thoughts heavy with the weight of our discoveries. The shadow in the mirror was a ruse, but the danger it masked was all too real. As the clock chimed midnight, I felt the chill of the unknown, a reminder that even Holmes's brilliance might not pierce the darkness that lay ahead. Chapter 6. The chase through London the night following our encounter in the Carroway study was one of restless anticipation. The fog of London, a fitting veil for the intrigue that enveloped us. At 2-1B Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes sat by the fire, the iron box of letters from the Order of the Saffron Veil open before him. their saffron-sealed secrets yielding slowly to his relentless intellect. I, Dr. John Watson, found sleep elusive, the cloaked man's cold laughter and the glint of his saffron-etched knife haunting my thoughts. The auction, set for the morrow in Bloomsbury, loomed as the centerpiece of Holmes's trap, but the letters hinted at a plot far grander than a mere theft or deception. Holmes, his pipe unlit, traced a finger over the ciphered directives, his grey eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. "These letters, Watson," he said, his voice low and precise, "are not mere correspondence. They are a blueprint for subversion, penned by a mind that seeks not wealth but power. Lord Reginald Ashbourne is no idle occultist. He orchestrates a revival of the order, and the mirror is his rallying cry." I leaned forward, my coffee grown cold. "Subversion, to what end, Holmes? The mirror is a trick, the shadow a projection. What does he gain by such theatrics?" Holmes's lips twitched in a faint, enigmatic smile. "Theatrics are a tool, Watson, to inspire fear or loyalty. The orders, rituals, their watcher in the glass, are symbols to unite followers. But these letters speak of a gathering, a conclave to be held under Ashbourne's aegis. The mirror is a totem, but the true prize lies in what it conceals, perhaps influence, perhaps secrets that could sway men of power." He pointed to a passage, its cipher freshly decoded. "The conclave shall anoint the veil's master, and the conduit shall open the path to dominion." This suggests a meeting of the order's remnants. With Ashbourne at its head, the auction will force his hand, but we must also pursue the mirror itself. Its theft from the docks was no accident. It is central to his plans. The morning brought a flurry of activity. Holmes dispatched telegrams to his network of informants, seeking word of the skiff that had spirited the mirror away. Wiggins, the sharp-eyed leader of the Baker Street irregulars, reported that the boat had been spotted near Limehouse, moored at a derelict wharf known to harbour smugglers. Holmes's eyes gleamed at the news. "The mirror has not left London," he said. "Ashbourne keeps it close, either for his conclave or to protect its secrets. We shall find it tonight, before the auction draws him out." We set out as dusk fell, the fog a heavy curtain that muffled the city's clamour. Holmes, in his dockworker's guise, moved with a predator's grace, while I followed, my revolver a reassuring weight in my pocket. The streets of Limehouse were a maze of narrow alleys and shadowed doorways, the air thick with the stench of pitch and river mud. We reached the wharf, a rotting structure jutting into the Thames, where a single skiff bobbed in the current, its hull marked with a faint saffron emblem. Holmes examined it, his lantern casting a dim glow. "The mirror passed through here," he murmured, pointing to a smear of luminescent powder on the deck identical to the vial found in Whitechapel. Footprints, fresh in the mud, led from the skiff to a nearby warehouse, its windows dark, but its door ajar. We entered cautiously, the air inside damp and heavy with the scent of decay. Crates and barrels loomed like silent sentinels, their shadows dancing in the lantern's light. Holmes moved with unerring instinct, his eyes scanning for traces of passage. Near a stack of crates, we found a canvas tarp, hastily discarded, and beneath it, the mirrored's carved frame, unmistakable. Its glass dark and cold. Holmes knelt, inspecting the frame with his pocket lens. "No damage," he said. They moved it with care, suggesting its value is not merely symbolic. But why here? Why risk exposure? Before I could reply, a scuffle sounded from the warehouse's rear. Holmes doused the lantern, and we crouched. Behind behind a crate, my hand on my revolver. Footsteps approached, and a figure emerged, Silas Vane, his pinched face pale with fear. He carried a lantern, its light trembling as he scanned the room. Behind him came another, the cloaked man from the docks, his scarf pulled low, his movements deliberate. "They're on to us," Vane hissed, his voice sharp with panic. "Holmes was at the house. He knows about the Magister." The cloaked man's voice was cold, unyielding. "Then we accelerate the plan. The conclave is tomorrow night, after the auction. The mirror must be there, or the order falters. Secure it, Vane, or you'll answer to him." Vane nodded, his hands shaking as he approached the mirror. Holmes whispered, "Now, Watson," and sprang forward, his voice ringing out. "Good evening, gentlemen. You seem overly fond of this glass." Vane yelped, dropping his lantern, which shattered, casting sparks across the floor. The cloaked man drew a pistol, but Holmes was faster, knocking it from his hand with a blow from his stick. I leveled my revolver, shouting, "Stand where you are." The cloaked man laughed, a sound like breaking ice. "You are persistent, Holmes, but you chase shadows. The mirror is nothing without the key, and that you shall never find." He lunged for a crate, smashing a vial of liquid at his feet. A noxious vapor billowed, stinging my eyes and throat. In the confusion, Vane and the cloaked man bolted, vanishing into the fog beyond the warehouse door. Holmes coughed, pulling me back. "Let them go, Watson. The mirror is ours, and with it, leverage." We secured the mirror, wrapping it in the tarp and arranging for Wiggins to summon a cart. As we waited, Holmes examined the warehouse, finding a scrap of paper tucked beneath a crater list of names, some familiar from Carroway's letters, all linked to the order. "The conclave's attendees," Holmes said. "Men of influence, drawn by Ashbourne's promises. This is no mere cult. Watson, it is a conspiracy." The cart arrived, and we transported the mirror to Baker Street, concealing it in our lodgings under Mrs. Hudson's bemused gaze. Holmes wasted no time resuming his study of the letters and the mirror's frame. He found no further compartments, but noted a faint inscription on the frame's underside. In Latin, speculum veritatis, custos arcanae, the mirror of truth, guardian of secrets. The key, Holmes mused, is not a physical object, but a knowledge. The letters and journal together form a cipher, pointing to the conclave's purpose. Ashbourne seeks to wield influence, perhaps blackmail, using secrets hidden in Carroway's house or the mirror itself. As midnight approached, Holmes outlined our next move. The auction would proceed, with a replica mirror procured by Lestrade from a theatrical supplier serving as bait. The real mirror would remain at Baker Street, under guard by Wiggins and his irregulars. "Ashbourne will come, or send his agents," Holmes said. "We shall be ready." I nodded, my thoughts troubled by the cloaked man's words. The mirror was nothing without the key, he had said, yet we held the mirror itself. What was the key, and how did it unlock the order's plans? As I prepared for the auction, the fog outside seemed to mirror the uncertainty within, a reminder that our chase through London had only deepened the mystery. Holmes, however, was undaunted, his eyes alight with the fire of the hunt. "The game grows clearer, Watson," he said, his pipe sending curls of smoke toward the ceiling. "Ashbourne believes he holds the advantage, but he underestimates us. Tomorrow, we shall turn his shadows to our purpose." I retired to bed, the mirrors, dark presence, a silent weight in our lodgings. The chase had brought us closer to the truth, But the specter of the Magister loomed larger, his motives as elusive as the fog that cloaked the city. With Holmes at my side, I felt a flicker of confidence, yet I could not shake the sense that we were running toward a darkness deeper than any we had faced before. Chapter 7. The Mirror's Secret. The morning after our nocturnal chase through the docks of Limehouse. The atmosphere at 2-1 Baker Street was charged with the quiet intensity that always accompanied Sherlock Holmes's pursuit of a solution. The fog outside had lifted slightly, revealing a London bathed in a wan, grey light, but within our lodgings, the air was thick with the scent of tobacco and the faint chemical temps of Holmes's experiments. The mirror, retrieved from the warehouse, and now concealed beneath a heavy cloth in the corner of our sitting room, seemed to cast a shadow of its own, its presence a silent challenge to Holmes's relentless intellect. I, Dr. John Watson, found myself both exhilarated and uneasy. The events of the previous night, the cloaked man's escape, the saffron-sealed letters, and the cryptic inscription on the mirror's frame swirling in my mind like the fog we had navigated. Holmes stood before the mirror, his lean frame taut with concentration, his grey eyes scanning its surface as though it might yield its secrets under his gaze alone. The iron box of letters, the journal of the late Mr. Carroway, and the scrap of paper bearing the name Ashbourne lay spread across the table, a constellation of clues pointing to a conspiracy that grew ever more intricate. The auction, set for this evening in Bloomsbury, loomed as the centerpiece of our trap, but Holmes's focus was on the mirror itself, convinced it held the key to Lord Reginald Ashbourne's plans. "Watson," he said, his voice sharp with purpose, "the mirror is no mere prop. Its inscription, Speculum Veritatis, Custos Arcanae, suggests it guards a secret, not in a mystical sense, but a mechanical one. The Order of the Saffron Veil cloaked their schemes in occult trappings, but their true aim is tangible. We must uncover the mirror's mechanism before the auction, lest Ashbourne's agents outmaneuver us." He removed the cloth, revealing the mirror's dark glass and ornate frame, its carved figures seeming to writhe in the morning light. With a small toolkit retrieved from his desk, Holmes began a meticulous disassembly, his fingers probing the frame's edges for hidden catches or seams. I watched, my medical training marveling at his precision, as he worked with the delicacy of a surgeon. After several minutes, a faint click sounded, and a section of the frame's lower panel slid open, revealing a concealed compartment no larger than a cigar box. Holmes extracted a small brass device, its surface etched with fine gears and a glass lens that gleamed with a faint, unnatural sheen. "A projector," he said, holding it to the light. "Ingeniously compact, powered by a chemical compound likely the phosphorescent powder we found. This is the source of our shadow, Watson. A beam of light, filtered through this lens, casts the image of a cloaked figure onto the glass." I leaned closer, examining the device. Its craftsmanship was remarkable, the work of a skilled engineer rather than a mere trickster. "But the eyes," I said, recalling the glowing red orbs that had chilled me in the Carroway study. "How are they achieved?" Holmes pointed to a tiny vial embedded in the device, filled with a luminescent fluid. "A chemical reaction, Watson. The powder, when activated by a spark or heat, emits a red glow. The lens shapes it into eyes, creating the illusion of a living presence. A clever ruse designed to terrify the superstitious." He set the projector aside and continued his inspection, running his fingers along the mirror's glass. "The glass itself is unusual," he said. "It is not silver-backed, as most mirrors are, but coated with a substance that enhances the projection's clarity. This is no antique, despite the frame's age. It was crafted for this purpose, likely within the last decade. I frowned, the pieces of the puzzle aligning but not yet complete. So the shadow was a deliberate deception, meant to drive Miss Carroway from her home. But why? The letters spoke of a conclave, of dominion. What does Ashbourne gain by such a charade? Holmes's eyes narrowed, his mind racing ahead. The letters, Watson, they are the heart of this. The mirror is a symbol, a tool to rally the order's followers. But the letters contain the true prize knowledge, perhaps, or leverage. Let us see what they reveal. He returned to the table, where the saffron-sealed letters lay in a neat row. Their cipher, a variant of the journals, was complex, but Holmes's earlier efforts had cracked its foundation. He worked swiftly, his pencil flying across a notepad as he translated. The letters were directives, issued by a figure signing only as M, instructing Carroway to secure a cache of documents hidden in his Kensington home. These documents, the letters hinted, were of national significance, capable of swaying men in high office. Blackmail, I said, the word heavy on my tongue. Ashbourne seeks to control influential figures using secrets buried in Carroway's house. Holmes nodded, his expression grim. Precisely, the mirror's shadow was a means to an end, designed to frighten Miss Carroway into abandoning the house, allowing Ashbourne's agents to search unhindered. But Carroway's death complicated matters, and now Ashbourne grows desperate. The conclave, mentioned in the letters, is likely a gathering to distribute these documents or to use them to consolidate power. He paused, his gaze returning to the mirror. There is more, he said softly. The inscription speaks of a key hidden in plain sight. I suspect the projector is only part of the mechanism. The mirror itself may conceal another secreter compartment, perhaps, or a clue to the document's location. He resumed his examination, tapping the glass with a small mallet, listening for variations in sound. Near the frame's upper edge, a faint hollow note echoed, and Holmes's eyes gleamed with triumph. With a delicate twist, he pried loose a section of the frame, revealing a second compartment, smaller than the first. Inside lay a single sheet of parchment, its edges scorched as though by fire. It bore a diagram of the mirror, with annotations in Latin and a list of names politicians, bankers, and a high-ranking official in the Foreign Office. Holmes studied the parchment, his face a mask of concentration. This is the key, he said. Not a physical object, but a map to the document's hiding place. The names are targetsmen Ashbourne seeks to control. The mirror was a distraction, but it also serves as a marker, pointing to the true cache. Within the house, I felt a chill, the scope of the conspiracy dawning. Then we must return to Kensington, I said. If the documents are there, we cannot let Ashbourne's agents find them. Holmes shook his head. Not yet, Watson. The auction is our priority. Ashbourne will send his men, or come himself, to secure the replica mirror. We shall use that moment to unmask him. The documents are safe for now, hidden where only we know to look. Let us prepare for tonight. The day passed in a blur of activity. Holmes sent Wiggins to monitor Ashbourne's townhouse in Mayfair, while I coordinated with Inspector Lestrade, ensuring his men would be stationed discreetly at the auction hall. The replica mirror, a convincing forgery crafted by a theatrical supplier, was delivered to Bloomsbury, where Holmes, in his auctioneer's disguise, would oversee the proceedings. I was to mingle with the crowd, my revolver concealed. watching for any sign of Ashbourne or his agents. As evening fell, the auction hall buzzed with a motley crowd: antiquarians, curiosity seekers, and a few sharp-eyed men who seemed out of place, their glances too keen for mere collectors. The replica mirror, draped in velvet, stood at the center of the stage, its frame a close match to the original. Holmes, as the florid auctioneer, commanded the room with a booming voice, his eyes scanning the crowd with predatory focus. The bidding began, slow at first, then growing heated as the mirror's mystical properties were described in florid terms. I spotted Silas Vane near the back, his nervous demeanor unmistakable, but no sign of the cloaked man or Ashbourne himself. As the bids climbed, a new figure emerged: a tall man, impeccably dressed, his face half hidden by a high collar. His eyes, cold and calculating, met mine briefly, and I felt a jolt of recognition. This was no ordinary bidder. Holmes noticed him too, his voice faltering for a fraction of a second before resuming its cadence. The man bid aggressively, his offers outpacing all others until the gavel fell, declaring him the winner. As he approached the stage to claim his prize, Holmes signaled Lestrade's men, who moved to block the exits, but the man was swift. He seized the replica mirror, shattering its glass with a single blow, revealing it as a fake. "You think to trap me, Holmes," he called, his voice carrying a familiar, icy edge. Before we could react, he hurled a smoke bomb to the floor, its acrid cloud enveloping the hall. In the chaos, he slipped through a side door, vanishing into the night. Holmes cursed under his breath, tearing off his wig. "Ashbourne," he said, "or his lieutenant. They know the mirror is false, but they cannot know we have the original. We must return to Baker Street now." We raced back, the fog swallowing our hansom's clatter. The true mirror stood, untouched, its secrets intact, but Holmes's face was grim. "The game shifts, Watson," he said. "Ashbourne is bolder than I anticipated. The conclave is tomorrow, and we must find the documents before he does." As I prepared for bed, the mirror's dark glass seemed to watch us, its secrets a silent challenge. The auction had failed to trap our quarry, but it had confirmed Ashbourne's desperation. The chase was far from over, and the shadow of the Magister loomed larger, his motives as opaque as the fog that cloaked London streets. Chapter 8: The German Connection, the failure of the auction trap. Though a setback, did little to dim the fire in Sherlock Holmes's eyes as we returned to 2-1B. Baker Street, in the early hours of that October night in 1889, the fog had thickened, once more, wrapping London in a shroud that mirrored the mystery we pursued. The true mirror, its dark glass and ornate frame concealed beneath a cloth in our sitting room, stood as a silent testament to our progress. Yet the escape of the man we believed to be Lord Reginald Ashbourne or his lieutenant gnawed at my resolve. I, Dr. John Watson, felt the weight of our adversary's cunning, his ability to slip through our fingers like the fog itself. Holmes, however, was undeterred, his mind already racing toward the next move in this intricate game as we settled by the fire. Holmes lit his pipe, its smoke curling toward the ceiling as he spread the saffron-sealed letters and Carroway journal before him. The projector, extracted from the mirror's frame, lay on the table, its brass gears glinting in the lamplight. "The auction was a gambit, Watson," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. It confirmed Ashbourne's desperation and his belief in the mirror's importance. But the letters and this device point beyond London to a mind more technical than mystical. He tapped the projector, his fingers tracing its intricate design. This is no work of a common trickster. The craftsmanship suggests a German hand, precise and scientific. I have seen similar mechanisms in Berlin, used by illusionists and engineers. We must trace its origin to understand Ashbourne's full design. I frowned, the scope of the case expanding beyond the confines of London's fog-bound streets. Germany, you think the order's reach extends so far? Holmes nodded, his eyes narrowing. The Order of the Saffron Veil was never confined to England. Carroway's papers mention a contact in Prague, Karol Novak, but the projector's design points to Berlin, where optical and chemical innovations flourish. I suspect a collaborator, perhaps the true architect of the shadow in the mirror. He turned to a telegram received that morning, its contents scrawled in his own hand from a decoded message. My inquiries to Berlin have borne fruit. A chemist, Dr. Heinrich Voss, is known for crafting devices like this optical projectors used in theatrical deceptions. He was last seen in London 2 years ago, working with a collector of occult artifacts. If Voss is involved, he may hold the key to Ashbourne's plans. The mention of Berlin stirred a memory of my military days, of tales of German precision. An ambition. Then we must go to Berlin, I said, though the prospect of leaving London in the midst of such a case filled me with unease. Holmes's smile was thin but resolute. Indeed, Watson, but we shall go prepared. Voss is no mere craftsman, he is a man of ambition, likely drawn into Ashbourne's orbit by promises of wealth or power. We shall pose as antiquarians, seeking his expertise, and uncover his role in this conspiracy. The morning was spent in preparations. Holmes dispatched a telegram to a contact in Berlin, a retired inspector named Muller, requesting information on Voss's whereabouts. He also arranged passage on an evening train to Dover, where we would catch a steamer to Calais and thence to Berlin. Miss Carroway, still under Lestrade's protection at a discreet hotel, was informed of our plans and urged to remain vigilant. The mirror, too valuable to leave unguarded, was entrusted to Wiggins and his irregulars, who would keep it hidden in a Baker Street cellar. As we boarded the train, the fog gave way to a cold, clear night, the stars sharp above the city. Holmes, disguised as a scholarly antiquarian with a greying beard and spectacles, was a picture of calm, while I, in similar garb, felt the weight of my revolver, a necessary precaution against the dangers we might face. The journey was swift, the train's rhythm lulling me into a restless doze. Haunted by images of glowing eyes and saffron emblems, Berlin greeted us with a crisp dawn, its streets bustling with the disciplined energy of a city on the rise. Muller, a stout man with a walrus moustache, met us at the station, his eyes sharp despite his age. Herr Holmes, he said, shaking hands with a firm grip, Voss is known to us. He operates a laboratory in Charlottenburg, a front for less savory dealings. He is cautious, but not untouchable. We proceeded to Charlottenburg, a district of elegant villas and industrial workshops, where Voss's laboratory stood a nondescript building with smoked windows and a heavy iron door. Holmes, in his antiquarian guise, knocked, presenting a forged letter of introduction from a London collector. The door was opened by a wiry assistant who ushered us into a cluttered workshop filled with glass vials, brass instruments, and the faint glow of luminescent compounds. Voss was a man of middle years, tall and gaunt, with eyes that gleamed with a fanatic's zeal. His hands, stained with chemicals, betrayed a nervous energy as he greeted us. Gentlemen, he said, his English accented but precise. You seek artifacts of the occult? Yes. I have many curiosities, but they come at a price. Holmes, his voice smooth and scholarly, steered the conversation to mirrors, hinting at an interest in bohemian relics. Voss's eyes flickered with recognition, though he maintained a facade of indifference. Mirrors are common, he said. What makes you seek one in particular? A piece from Prague, Holmes replied, reputed to cast unusual reflections. We heard you crafted a device to enhance such effects. Voss's composure faltered, his fingers twitching. You are well informed, he said, his tone guarded. I have made such devices, yes, for collectors with specific tastes. But they are mere novelties, nothing more. Holmes pressed, his questions subtle but relentless, probing connections to London and the Order. The chemist grew evasive, his answers vague, until Holmes mentioned the name Ashbourne. Voss froze, his eyes darting to the door. I know no such man, he said, too quickly. You lie poorly, Herr Voss, Holmes said, shedding his disguise with a flick of his spectacles. I am Sherlock Holmes, and I know you built the projector for the mirror in Kensington. Tell me of Ashbourne and the Order, or you shall answer to Scotland Yard. Voss's face paled, but his arrogance held. You have no authority here, Holmes. Ashbourne is beyond your reach. He paid me to craft the projector, yes, to frighten a woman into selling her home, but the mirror's true purpose, that is his secret, not mine. Holmes's eyes narrowed, and the conclave. What does Ashbourne plan? Voss laughed, a brittle sound, a gathering of fools chasing shadows. He believes the mirror unlocks a fortune gems hidden in the Carroway house. I care nothing for his schemes. I took his gold and gave him his toy. Holmes seized Voss's arm, his grip like iron. You gave him more than a toy. You gave him a tool to manipulate, to control. Where is he now? Voss wrenched free, backing toward a shelf of chemicals. You'll get nothing more from me, he shouted, hurling a vial to the floor. A noxious cloud erupted, and in the confusion he fled through a rear door. Holmes pursued, but Voss was swift. Vanishing into the labyrinth of Berlin's streets, we returned to Muller, who promised to track Voss, though Holmes was skeptical of success. He will run to Ashbourne, he said, or hide until the conclave is over. But we have what we need, Watson. Voss confirmed the mirror's purpose a ruse to secure gems and hinted at Ashbourne's broader ambitions. On the return journey to London, Holmes was silent, his mind sifting through the new evidence. The letters, the projector, and Voss's admissions painted a picture of a conspiracy rooted not in mysticism, but in greed and power. The gems, hidden in Carroway's house, were the immediate prize, but the conclave suggested a larger goal. Influence over the names listed in the mirror's parchment. As we neared London, Holmes turned to me, his eyes alight with resolve. The conclave is tomorrow, Watson. We must return to Kensington and find those gems before Ashbourne does. The mirror has revealed its secret, but the true battle lies ahead. I nodded, the weight of our journey settling upon me. The German connection had clarified the mirror's mechanics, but Ashbourne's shadow loomed larger, his motives as elusive as the fog that awaited us in London. With Holmes at my side, I felt a flicker of hope, but the chill of the unknown lingered, a reminder that even the sharpest mind could not yet pierce the heart of this darkness. Chapter 9. The Magister's Shadow, the Return to London. For From Berlin was a journey cloaked in the restless anticipation that marked our pursuit of the elusive Lord Reginald Ashbourne, the train's rhythmic clatter and the steamer's steady churn. Across the channel did little to soothe my nerves, for the revelations of Dr. Heinrich Voss had cast a new light on the conspiracy we unravelled. At 2-1B Baker Street, the fog of late October 1889 greeted us like an old adversary, its tendrils seeping through the cracks of our lodgings, mingling with the scent of Holmes's pipe and the faint chemical residue of his experiments. I, Dr. John Watson, found myself both weary and alert. The weight of our discoveries, the projector, the saffron-sealed letters, and the confirmation of Ashbourne as the Magister pressing heavily upon me. Sherlock Holmes, however, was a dynamo of purpose. He stood before the fire, the mirror's projector dismantled on the table, its components laid out like the bones of some mechanical beast. The saffron-sealed letters and Carroway's journal were spread beside it, their ciphers now largely decoded, revealing a web of intrigue that stretched from London's elite to the shadowed corners of Europe. Holmes's grey eyes, sharp as ever, darted between the papers, his mind weaving connections with a speed I could scarcely follow. "Watson," he said, his voice low and precise, "Voss has given us the mirror's mechanics, but motives remain the heart of this matter. The gems he seeks are a means to an end, a lure to draw followers to his conclave. The Order of the Saffron Veil is not merely a cult of mystics, is a syndicate poised to wield influence through secrets and fear." I settled into my chair, the fire's warmth a small comfort against the chill of his words. "Influence," I said. "You mean blackmail, Holmes? Those names in the mirror's parchment, politicians, bankers, a Foreign Office official, Ashbourne, plans to control them?" Holmes nodded, his pipe sending curls of smoke toward the ceiling. "Precisely. The gems are a fortune to fund his schemes, but the documents Carroway hid are the true prize. They contain secrets, perhaps evidence of indiscretions or treason capable of bending men to his will. The conclave, set for tonight, is his moment. To consolidate power, we must act before he does." He turned to the journal, pointing to a passage decoded in Berlin. "The heart of the veil lies beneath the hearth, where the watcher's gaze falls. This confirms our earlier finder. Iron box in the fireplace, but I suspect there is more." Carroway was cunning. He would not entrust all to one hiding place. Holmes's plan was twofold. We would return to the Carroway residence in Kensington to search for the remaining documents, while Wiggins and his irregulars kept watch on Ashbourne's Mayfair townhouse, alert for signs of the conclave. Inspector Lestrade, informed by telegram, would station men at key points across London, ready to move if Holmes signalled. The mirror, still in our possession, would remain at Baker Street, guarded by Mrs. Hudson's nephew, a burly lad with a stout heart. As dusk fell, we set out for Kensington, the fog a heavy curtain that muffled our hansom's clatter. Holmes, in his dockworker's guise to avoid recognition, was silent, his eyes scanning the streets for any hint of pursuit. I carried my revolver, its weight a grim reminder of the danger we faced. The Carroway house loomed, dark and silent, its windows like empty eyes in the mist. Grayson, the butler, admitted us, his face etched with worry. "Miss Carroway is safe at the hotel, sir," he said, "but the house feels watched." Holmes dismissed his fears with a wave. "Imagination, Grayson, light the lamps and leave us to our work." The study was as we had left it, the fireplace. Cold, the mirror's absence leaving a void above the mantel. Holmes knelt by the hearth, his fingers probing the stones with surgical precision. The letters spoke of the watcher's gaze, he said. The mirror faced the fireplace, suggesting the hiding place is aligned with its line of sight. He tapped a stone near the hearth's center, producing a hollow echo. With a small crowbar, he pried it loose, revealing a second cavity deeper than the first. Inside lay a leather pouch, sealed with the same saffron emblem as the letters. Holmes opened it, extracting a bundle of documents, letters, contracts, and a ledger detailing transactions between Carroway and several prominent figures, including coded references to payments and favors. Blackmail material, Holmes said, his voice grim, enough to ruin half a dozen men in Parliament. But there is more. A map, Watson. He unfolded a parchment, its edges worn but intact, depicting the Carroway house with a mark in the cellar. Another cache, he said. Carroway was thorough, hiding his secrets in layers. We must check the cellar before we leave. We descended to the basement, a damp, cavernous space lit only by our lantern. The air was heavy with the scent of mold and earth, and the shadows seemed to shift beyond the light's reach. Holmes followed the map's directions, locating a loose flagstone beneath a stack of crates. Beneath it lay a tin box, its contents a single document, a manifesto of the Order of the Saffron Veil, outlining a plan to destabilize the government. Through strategic blackmail and alliances with foreign powers, Holmes's eyes gleamed with triumph. This is what Ashbourne seeks, he said. Not gems, but leverage. The conclave is his bid to activate this plan, rallying his followers to execute it. Before we could examine further, a creak from the stairs snapped us to attention. Holmes doused the lantern, and we crouched behind the crates, my revolver at the ready. A figure descended, cloaked and silent, a lantern casting a faint glow. It was not Vane or the man from the docks, but a new figure, his movements deliberate, his scarf pulled low. He carried a small case, its contents clinking softly. Chemicals, perhaps, or tools. Holmes whispered. He searches for the same prize. Let him lead us. The man moved to the flagstone, his lantern revealing the empty cavity. He cursed softly, his voice low but distinct, a cultured tone, tinged with frustration. The Magister will have my head, he muttered, turning to leave. Holmes sprang forward, his stick raised. Not yet, sir, he said, his voice cutting through the darkness. You are Ashbourne's man, I presume. The figure spun, drawing a knife, but Holmes was faster, disarming him with a precise strike. I seized his arms, pinning him as Holmes lit the lantern. The man's face was pale, his eyes wide with fire. Younger man, not the cloaked figure from before, but clearly in Ashbourne's employ. Speak, Holmes commanded. Where is the conclave, and what does Ashbourne plan? The man struggled, then sagged. It's tonight, in Sussex, Ashbourne's estate. The mirror was to be the centerpiece, but you've taken it. He'll use the documents instead to rally the order. Holmes nodded, releasing him to Lestrade's men, who had been summoned by a whistle. To Sussex, Watson, he said. The game reaches its climax. We must reach Ashbourne's estate before the conclave begins. We left the house, the tin box secured in Holmes's coat. The fog had thickened, but Holmes's resolve was a beacon, guiding us through the night. As our hansom raced toward the station, I felt the weight of the manifesto, its words a shadow far darker than any projection in a mirror. Ashbourne's plan was no mere theft or deception, was a bid for power that could shake the foundations of the realm. Holmes, sensing my unease, placed a hand on my shoulder. "Courage, Watson," he said. "The Magister casts a long shadow, but we shall bring it into the light." I nodded, gripping my revolver, ready to face whatever awaited us in Sussex. The mirror's secret was ours, but the true battle lay ahead, in the heart of Ashbourne's domain, where the Magister's shadow held sway. Chapter 10. The confrontation. The night train to Sussex rattled through the darkened countryside. Its rhythm a stark counterpoint to the tension that gripped me as we sped toward Lord Reginald Ashbourne's estate. The fog of London had given way to a crisp, moonless night, the stars obscured by clouds that seemed to mirror the weight of our mission. I, Dr. John Watson, sat opposite Sherlock Holmes, my revolver a reassuring presence in my coat, though its utility against the shadowy machinations of the Order of the Saffron Veil remained uncertain. Holmes, his lean frame cloaked in a dark overcoat, was a study in focused intensity, his grey eyes fixed on the tin box containing the manifesto we had retrieved from the Carroway cellar. The document, with its chilling outline of a plot to destabilize the government through blackmail and foreign alliances, lay heavy between us, a silent testament to the stakes we faced. Holmes broke the silence, his voice low and deliberate. "Watson, we approach the heart of the conspiracy. Ashbourne's estate is no mere country house, is a fortress for his ambitions. The conclave tonight is his bid to rally the Order's remnants, to wield the manifesto's secrets as a weapon. We must infiltrate and disrupt it before he can act." I nodded, my thoughts troubled by the prisoner's words in Kensington. The man we captured spoke of the mirror as the centerpiece. Without it, will Ashbourne proceed? Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. The mirror was a symbol, Watson, a theatrical flourish to inspire awe. Its absence weakens his hold, but the manifesto is his true power. He will use it to bind his followers, promising them influence or riches. Our task is to seize that power before he can wield it. Our plan was audacious yet precise. We would approach Ashbourne's estate under cover of darkness, posing as late arrivals to the conclave, using forged credentials crafted by Holmes from details in Carroway's letters. Inspector Lestrade, alerted by telegram, would follow with a small force, ready to move on Holmes's signal. The mirror, safely hidden at Baker Street, was no longer the focus, but its secrets, the projector and the parchment had led us to. This moment, we alighted at a small station near Ashbourne's estate. The air cold and sharp with the scent of pine and damp earth. The manor lay a mile distant, a Gothic pile of turrets and gables looming against the night sky. Its windows glowed faintly, suggesting activity within, and the occasional shadow passing across them hinted at a gathering already underway. Holmes led the way, his movements silent and sure, guiding us through a copse of trees that bordered the estate at the perimeter. We paused, observing a side gate guarded by a single figure, a cloaked man, his lantern casting a dim glow. Holmes signaled for silence, and we crept closer, using the underbrush for cover. The guard was inattentive, his gaze fixed on the manor, and Holmes dispatched him with a swift, silent blow to the neck, catching him as he fell. "No permanent harm," Holmes whispered, binding the man's hands with a cord from his pocket, "but he will not interfere." We slipped through the gate, entering a courtyard shadowed by ivy-clad walls. The manor's rear entrance was unguarded, its door slightly ajar, as though expecting latecomers. Holmes examined it, his pocket lens glinting as he checked for traps. Finding none, he pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit corridor lined with portraits and mirrors, their glass reflecting our cautious movements like accusing eyes. The air within was heavy with the scent of wax and incense, and a low murmur of voices drifted from deeper in the house. Holmes led us toward the sound, his steps measured, his hand resting lightly on the stick concealed beneath his cloak. We reached a set of double doors, their panels carved with saffron emblems, and Holmes pressed his ear to the wood, listening intently. "A ritual," he whispered. "The conclave is in session. We must act swiftly." He produced a forged invitation, its seal a near-perfect replica of the Order's emblem, and pushed open the doors. The room beyond was a vast hall, its walls draped in saffron cloth, its ceiling lost in shadow. A dozen figures, cloaked and masked, stood in a circle around a raised platform, where a man in a black robe presided. His face was obscured, but his voice cold and commanding marked him as the cloaked man from the docks. Though his bearing suggested he was not Ashbourne himself, at the platform's center stood a table, draped in velvet, upon which rested a collection of documents, likely the manifestos, duplicates, or related papers. The absence of the mirror was notable, but the speaker gestured to an empty space, as though invoking its presence. "The Watcher's gaze is upon us," he intoned, "and the Magister's will shall guide us to dominion." Holmes stepped forward, his forged invitation raised. "Forgive our tardiness," he said, his voice smooth and authoritative. "We come from London, bearing news of the conduit." The speaker paused, his eyes narrowing behind his mask. "You are not known to us," he said. "Speak the oath." Holmes, undaunted, recited a phrase gleaned from Carroway's journal. "By the veil's shadow, we serve the light." The words, though cryptic, seemed to satisfy the assembly, and we were permitted to join the circle, our faces half hidden by our cloak. As the ritual continued, Holmes's eyes scanned the room, noting exits and faces. I gripped my revolver, concealed beneath my coat, my heart pounding as the speaker outlined the Order's alliances with foreign agents, blackmail to sway Parliament, a coup disguised as reform. The manifesto's secrets were the key, he declared, to reshaping the realm. Holmes leaned close, his whisper barely audible. "The speaker is not Ashbourne, lacks the authority. The Magister must be here, watching." He nodded toward a shadowed alcove where a figure stood apart, his posture regal, his eyes glinting in the candlelight. It was Ashbourne, I was certain, his presence commanding despite his silence. Holmes signaled me to move, and we edged toward the alcove, using the ritual's distraction to cover our approach. But Ashbourne was no fool. His eyes met Holmes's, and a faint smile curved his lips. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice low and resonant, "you are persistent, but you tread on dangerous ground." Holmes stepped forward, his stick raised. "Lord Ashbourne, your game is ended. The manifesto is ours, and your conclave is exposed." Ashbourne laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You have the mirror, but not the truth. The conduit opens beyond your grasp." He raised a hand, and the hall erupted in chaos. The cloaked figures drew weapons, knives, and pistols while the speaker shouted for order. Holmes lunged for Ashbourne, but the peer was swift, retreating through a hidden panel in the wall. I fired a warning shot, scattering the assembly, but the panel slammed shut, leaving us facing a dozen armed men. Holmes, calm amid the fray, seized a candelabrum and hurled it at a drapery, setting it alight. The flames spread, sowing panic, and we fought our way to the doors, my revolver keeping the cloaked figures at bay. Lestrade's men burst in, their truncheons swinging, and the conclave dissolved into a melee of shouts and fleeing shadows. We pursued Ashbourne's panel, finding a narrow passage lit by flickering torches. It led to a subterranean chamber, its walls lined with mirrors that reflected our every move, creating a dizzying maze of light and shadow. At its center stood Ashbourne, the true mirror from Baker Street now before him, its glass dark and ominous. "You were too late, Holmes," he said, his hand on a lever embedded in the floor. The conduit opens, and the order rises. Holmes advanced, his voice steady. "Your mirrors are tricks, Ashbourne, and your order is a delusion. Surrender or face the consequences." Ashbourne's eyes blazed, but before he could act, Holmes sprang forward, striking the lever with his stick. A grinding sound filled the chamber, and the mirror swung open, revealing a passage beyond. Ashbourne lunged for it, but Holmes tackled him, pinning him to the ground as Lestrade's men arrived. The peer struggled, his composure shattered. "You cannot stop it," he spat. "The order is eternal." Holmes bound his wrists, his face a mask of calm. "Eternal or not, you are finished. The manifesto is ours, and your followers are scattered." We secured Ashbourne, and Lestrade's men cleared the chamber, seizing the documents on the platform. The passage behind the mirror led to a small vault, empty save for a single saffron-sealed envelope of final directive, its contents too damaged to read. The mirrors, we discovered, were rigged with projectors, their reflections part of Ashbourne's theatrical deception as we left the estate. The manor ablaze with Lestrade's men in control. I felt a mix of triumph and unease. The confrontation had unmasked the Magister, but his words lingered the conduit, the order's eternity. Holmes, however, was resolute, the manifesto secure in his coat. "The game is not over. Watson," he said as we boarded the train back to London, "but the Magister's shadow is broken. We have struck a blow, and the light of reason will finish the rest." I nodded, the night's chaos fading into the rhythm of the train. The mirrors had been shattered, but their reflections haunted me, a reminder that even Holmes's brilliance could not yet dispel all the shadows we had faced. Chapter 11. The Twist Unveiled. The Return to London from Ashbourne's Sussex estate was a journey steeped in the quiet aftermath of our confrontation. The night train's steady clatter, a counterpoint to the tumult of thoughts that swirled in my mind, the events at the manor, the chaotic conclave, the maze of mirrors, and the capture of Lord Reginald Ashbourne, the Magister of the Order of the Saffron Veil, had left me both exhilarated and unsettled. I, Dr. John Watson, clutched the tin box containing the manifesto, its weight a tangible reminder of the conspiracy we had thwarted. Yet Ashbourne's final words, spoken with a chilling certainty, "The conduit opens and the order is eternal," echoed in my ears, hinting at a deeper truth yet to be uncovered. Sherlock Holmes, seated opposite me, was a study in calm resolve, his grey eyes fixed on the darkened window, where the countryside blurred into shadow. The manifesto, with its outline of blackmail and foreign alliances, was secure in our possession, and Ashbourne was in Lestrade's custody, bound for London to face justice. Yet Holmes's expression betrayed a lingering unease, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest, a sign that the case was not yet closed in his mind. "Watson," he said at last, his voice low and measured. "We have struck a blow against the order." But Ashbourne's defiance suggests a hidden card. The mirror was a distraction, the manifesto a weapon. But his mention of a conduit points to something more, a final secret we have not yet grasped. I frowned, the night's events replaying in my mind. The conduit, you think it's more than the mirror's passage? We found the vault empty, save for that damaged envelope. Holmes nodded, his gaze distant. The envelope was a decoy, Watson, meant to mislead. Ashbourne's plan hinges on something tangible, something he believed would outlast his capture. We must return to the mirror at Baker Street and examine it further. The inscription "Speculum Veritatis, Custos Aconai" may hold the final clue. The train pulled into Victoria Station as dawn broke, the fog of London thinner now, revealing a city stirring to life. We hastened to 2-1B, where the mirror stood in the cellar, guarded by Wiggins and his irregulars. Mrs. Hudson, roused by our arrival, greeted us with a mix of relief and exasperation. Her usual composure strained by the presence of the ominous relic in her home. The cellar was damp and shadowed, the mirror's dark glass reflecting the flicker of our lantern like a pool of ink. Holmes removed the cloth, his fingers tracing the frame's carvings with renewed intensity. The projector and parchment were but the first layer, he said. The conduit Ashbourne spoke of is not a passage, but a mechanism, a hidden function within the mirror itself. He examined the frame's upper edge, where the second compartment had been found, and then turned his attention to the glass. Using a small chisel, he tapped gently along its surface, listening for variations in sound. Near the center, a faint hollow resonance answered, and Holmes's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Here, Watson," he said, pressing firmly on the glass. A click sounded, and a section of the mirror slid aside, revealing a shallow recess within the glass itself. Feat of craftsmanship I had never seen. Inside lay a single object, a brass key, its head etched with a saffron flower. Attached to it was a folded note, its script in Ashbourne's hand. The conduit opens with the key in the heart of the veil. Holmes unfolded the note, his brow furrowing as he read a second line. "The heart lies in the Strand, where the shadows meet." "The Strand," I said, puzzled. "Not Kensington. We searched the house thoroughly." Holmes's lips curved in a grim smile. "A misdirection, Watson." Ashbourne played a deeper game. The Strand is a busy thoroughfare, home to banks, theatres, and hidden vaults. The note suggests a safe deposit box, likely in a bank, where the true prize is kept. The mirror was a guide, not the end. He pocketed the key, his mind racing. We must act swiftly. Ashbourne's followers may still be active, seeking this key. The conclave was disrupted, but the Order's network remains. We ascended to the sitting room, where Holmes consulted a map of London, pinpointing banks along the Strand. One stood out, the Imperial Trust Bank, known for its discreet services to the wealthy and powerful. "A likely candidate," Holmes said. "We shall visit at once, posing as Carroway's executors, claiming his effects." We set out, the morning bustle of London a stark contrast to the night's shadows. The Imperial Trust Bank was a grand edifice, its marble halls echoing with the clink of coins and the murmur of clerks. Holmes, in the guise of a solicitor, presented a forged letter of authority, claiming access to Carroway's safe deposit box. The manager, a jaw man with spectacles, hesitated but complied, leading us to a vault lined with steel boxes. Using the brass key, Holmes opened box 417, revealing a leather case. Inside were not gems or gold, but a collection of documents, letters, photographs, and coded ledgers detailing a plot far beyond blackmail. The papers outlined a conspiracy to fund a coup against the government, backed by foreign agents from a rival power. Names of complicit officials, dates of clandestine meetings, and sums of money transferred through European banks were meticulously recorded. A damning archive of treason. Holmes's face was grim as he scanned the documents. This is the conduit, what's in the heart of Ashbourne's plan. Not mere blackmail, but a bid to destabilize the realm, using foreign gold to sow chaos. The order was a front, a means to rally traitors under a mystical guise. I felt a chill, the scope of the plot staggering, and the mirror, the shadow, a distraction, Holmes said, to keep Carroway's daughter from the house while Ashbourne's men searched for this key. Carroway was no innocent. He was complicit, perhaps coerced, and hid the key in the mirror to protect himself. His death forced Ashbourne to act openly. Before we could leave, a commotion erupted at the vault's entrance. 2 men, cloaked and armed, burst in, their faces masked but their intent clear. "The key," one shouted, brandishing a pistol. Holmes, with his uncanny reflexes, hurled the leather case at them, scattering papers and creating a moment's confusion. I drew my revolver, firing a warning shot that echoed in the vault, while Holmes tackled the nearest man, disarming him with a swift blow. The second man lunged, but Lestrade's constables, alerted by Holmes's earlier telegram, stormed in, subduing him. The men were unmasked claw-ranking members of the order, desperate to retrieve the documents for their master. Holmes secured the papers, his calm unshaken. "The game is up," he said. "Ashbourne's empire crumbles." We returned to Baker Street with the documents, Lestrade's men escorting the prisoners to Scotland Yard. Holmes spread the papers on the table, cross-referencing them with Carroway's journal. "The coup was planned for next month," he said, "timed to coincide with a diplomatic crisis. These documents will ensure its failure, and the Foreign Office will be most interested." As evening fell, Miss Carroway arrived, her face pale, but her eyes resolute. Holmes explained the plot, sparing her the harshest details of her father's involvement. "Your home is safe," he said, "and the mirror's shadow will haunt you no more." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson. I feared a ghost, but you have vanquished a far greater evil." Holmes waved off her gratitude, his mind already turning to the next challenge. The evil was human, Miss Carroway, and humans are fallible. The order is broken, but its echoes may linger. As she left, I turned to Holmes, the weight of the documents heavy in my thoughts. A coup, Holmes, if we had not found the key. He lit his pipe, his eyes distant. "But we did, Watson. The mirror showed us a shadow, but reason revealed the truth. Ashbourne's ambition was his downfall, and the conduit is closed." I nodded, the night's revelations settling like the fog outside. The twist had been unveiled, a plot not of ghosts but of treason, hidden in plain sight. Yet as I glanced at the mirror, now stripped of its secrets, I could not shake the feeling that some shadows lingered beyond even Holmes's piercing light. Chapter 12. The aftermath of days following our return from the Imperial Trust Bank were marked by a quiet that seemed almost unnatural after the storm of our confrontation with Lord Reginald Ashbourne and his Order of the Saffron Veil, London. In late October 1889, lay under a pall of fog that softened the city's edges. But within the confines of 2-1B Baker Street, The air was charged with the residue of our triumph. I, Dr. John Watson, sat by the fire, my pen scratching across the pages of my journal as I sought to capture the extraordinary events that had unfolded. The mirror, stripped of its mechanical secrets and now relegated to a corner of our cellar, no longer cast its eerie shadow, yet its presence lingered in my thoughts, a silent witness to the conspiracy we had unraveled. Sherlock Holmes, ever the restless spirit, stood at the window, his lean silhouette framed against the fog, his pipe sending lazy curls of smoke toward the ceiling. The tin box containing the manifesto and the leather case of treasonous documents from the bank vault lay on the table, their contents now in the hands of the Foreign Office, courtesy of Inspector Lestrade's discreet delivery. Ashbourne, the Magister, languished in a Scotland Yard cell, his followers scattered or arrested, their conclave a shattered dream. Yet Holmes's demeanour suggested the case was not entirely closed in his mind, his grey eyes distant as though searching for a final thread yet to be tied. "Watson," he said at last, turning from the window, "you are chronicling our adventure, I presume. Be cautious in your account. The Foreign Office has requested discretion, and the public must not know how close we came to catastrophe." I nodded, setting my pen aside. "I'll keep to the essentials, Holmes. But the scope of it treason, a coup, foreign agents sit staggering. Without the mirror, we might never have uncovered it." Holmes's lips twitched in a faint smile. The mirror was a beacon, Watson, drawing us to the truth. Its shadow was a clever ruse, but it was Ashbourne's ambition that betrayed him. Men of such hubris rarely conceal their tracks as well as they believe. He moved to the table, picking up the brass key we had found in the mirror's hidden recess. Its saffron flower etching glinted in the lamplight, a relic of the orders. "Audacity. This key," he said, "was Carroway's insurance, hidden where only the initiated would look. His complicity in the plot troubles me still. Was he a willing traitor, or a man coerced by fear?" I considered the question, recalling Miss Carroway's grief. She knew nothing of her father's dealings, I said. He shielded her, perhaps, out of guilt. But why hide the key in the mirror, knowing it would draw attention? Holmes set the key down, his fingers drumming lightly. Carroway was cunning. The mirror's reputation as a cursed object ensured it would remain untouched, even by his daughter. The projector and its shadow were Ashbourne's addition, a desperate bid to clear the house after Carroway's death. But Carroway's foresight outlasted him. A knock at the door interrupted us, and Mrs. Hudson ushered in Miss Eliza Carroway, her face no longer pale with fear but softened by relief. She carried a small parcel wrapped in brown paper, and her eyes held a quiet strength as she greeted us. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, her voice steady, "I cannot thank you enough. My home is mine again, and the shadow no longer haunts me." Holmes inclined his head, his manner formal but kind. "Your courage was no small part of our success, Miss Carroway. The mirror is stripped of its illusions, and you may rest easy." She unwrapped the parcel, revealing a small, leather-bound book, her father's diary, distinct from the coded journal. "I found this in the study," she said. "It's not in cipher, but it speaks of the mirror and his regrets." I thought, "You should see it." Holmes took the diary, his eyes scanning its pages with keen interest. The entries were brief, written in a trembling hand, detailing Carroway's entanglement with the order. He had been drawn in by promises of wealth, only to discover their true increase in, fearing for his life and his daughter's safety. He hid the key in the mirror, hoping to expose the order if forced to act. His death, it seemed, was no accident but a murder, likely at Ashbourne's command. Holmes closed the diary, his expression somber. Your father was a flawed man, Miss Carroway, but he sought redemption in the end. This diary will aid the authorities in dismantling what remains of the order. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I only wish he had trusted me, but you have given me peace, and for that I am forever grateful. After she departed, Holmes returned to the fire, his mood pensive. A tragic figure, Carroway, he said, caught in a web of his own making, yet he left us the means to unravel it. The order is broken, Watson, but its echoes may linger in the shadows of power. I glanced at the documents on the table, their secrets now in safer hands. The Foreign Office will act on this, won't they? The names, the foreign connections, surely they'll root out the traitors. Holmes's smile was wry. Governments are slow beasts, Watson, and often blind to their own flaws. But Lestrade assures me the key figures are under watch. The coup is thwarted, and Ashbourne's influence is severed. He picked up the brass key once more, turning it in his fingers. This case began with a shadow, a trick of light and fear, yet it led us to a truth far darker. The mirror reflected not ghosts, but the greed and ambition of men. I nodded, my thoughts turning to the nights of pursuit, the fog-bound chasers, and the chilling glow of the shadow's eyes. It's a tale for the ages, Holmes. The papers are already calling it the case of the haunted mirror. He chuckled, a rare sound. Let them have their sensationalism. The truth is enough for us. But mind your account. Watson, omit the manifesto's details. Let the public believe. It was a ghost we banished. As evening fell, the fog thickened outside, cloaking Baker Street in its familiar embrace. Holmes took up his violin, its mournful notes filling the room, a requiem for the shadows we had dispelled. The mirror, now a harmless relic, would be returned to Miss Carroway, its secrets laid bare. The Order of the Saffron Veil was no more, its members scattered or imprisoned, its plans reduced to ashes. Yet as I penned the final lines of my account, I could not shake a lingering unease. Ashbourne's words, the Order's eternity hinted at a resilience we might not have fully crushed. Holmes, sensing my mood, set down his violin and clapped a hand on my shoulder. Rest easy, Watson, he said, his eyes gleaming with quiet confidence. The shadows are gone, and we remain. Let the fog hide what it will, our work is done. I smiled, reassured by his certainty. The aftermath of our adventure was a victory, hard won and complete. But as I glanced at the window, where the fog pressed close, I wondered what other shadows might lurk beyond, waiting for Sherlock Holmes to bring them into the light. Chapter 13. A final reflection, the quiet that settled over 2-1B, Baker Street in the days following the dismantling of the Order of the Saffron Veil was a stark contrast to the frenetic pace of our recent adventures. The fog of late October 1889 still clung to London's streets, but within our lodgings the air was clear, scented only by the familiar temps of Holmes's pipe and the faint mustiness of old books. I, Dr. John Watson, sat at my desk, my pen poised over the pages of my journal, struggling to encapsulate the extraordinary case that had begun with a shadow in a mirror and ended with the exposure of a treasonous conspiracy. The mirror itself, now stripped of its mechanical secrets and returned to Miss Eliza Carroway, stood as a mute relic of our triumph. Yet its dark glass lingered in my thoughts, a symbol of the mysteries we had unraveled. Sherlock Holmes, ever restless, paced before the fire, his lean frame casting long shadows across the room. The tin box and leather case, containing the manifesto and incriminating documents, were now safely in the hands of the Foreign Office, their contents under scrutiny by men whose names I would never know. Lord Reginald Ashbourne, the Magister, remained in custody, his grand schemes reduced to the cold reality of a Scotland Yard cell. The Order's followers, those not apprehended at the Sussex estate, had scattered, their conclave a fading echo in London's underbelly. Yet Holmes's demeanour suggested a mind not yet at rest, his grey eyes scanning the room as though seeking one final clue. "Watson," he said, pausing to light his pipe, "you are weaving our tale into one of your narratives, I presume. I trust you will temper the drama. The public delights in ghosts, but the truth of this case is far more chilling." I set my pen down, meeting his gaze. "Chilling, indeed, Holmes. A plot to overthrow the government, funded by foreign gold, masked by occult theater. A story that would shock even the most jaded reader. But I'll keep to the essentials, as you advised. The Foreign Office would have my head otherwise." He chuckled, a rare sound, and settled into his armchair. "The Foreign Office is a cautious beast, Watson, but they owe us a debt. The manifesto and those documents have unmasked traitors in their midst. Ashbourne's ambition was his undoing, but his cunning was formidable." I nodded, my thoughts turning to the brass key, its saffron flower etching a silent testament to the Order's reach. "And Carroway," I said. "His diary revealed a man trapped by his own choices, murdered to silence him. Do you think he intended to betray the Order as his final act?" Holmes exhaled a plume of smoke, his expression pensive. "Carroway was a pawn, Watson, drawn in by promises of wealth and ensnared by fear. His diary suggests remorse, a desire to protect his daughter by hiding the key. His murder, likely at Ashbourne's command, was a desperate act to prevent exposure. But he outwitted them in death, leaving us the means to find the truth." The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows that danced across the walls, and I found myself glancing toward the corner where the mirror had stood before its return to Kensington. "The mirror," I said. "It was a masterful deception, those glowing eyes, the cloaked figure. Even knowing it was a projector, I can't shake the chill of seeing it." Holmes's lips curved in a wry smile. "Fear is a potent weapon. Watson and Ashbourne wielded it well. The projector was Voss's creation, a marvel of German engineering. But the shadow was Ashbourne's design, crafted to exploit superstition. Yet it was the mirror's true secret, the key that led us to the heart of his plot." He rose, retrieving the diary Miss Carroway had given us, its pages worn but legible. Carroway's final entry speaks of the heart of the veil, a phrase echoed in the note with the key. It was not the gems Ashbourne sought, but the documents, hidden in plain sight at the Imperial Trust Bank. Carroway's foresight preserved them, and our persistence uncovered them. I considered the scope of our journey from the haunted study in Kensington to the fog-bound docks, from Berlin's chemical workshops to the mirrored chamber in Sussex. "It's a tale of shadows and secrets," I said, "but also of your brilliance, Holmes. Without your logic, we'd have been lost in the fog." He waved off the compliment, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Logic is merely the light that pierces the fog, Watson. Ashbourne underestimated it, as do all who believe deception can outlast reason. But I confess, this case tested even my methods. The Order's reach was vast, its motives cloaked in layers of misdirection. A knock at the door heralded Inspector Lestrade, his ferret-like features softened by a rare grin. "Holmes, Watson," he said, stepping inside. "The Foreign Office sends its thanks unofficially, of course. Those documents have set Whitehall buzzing. Half a dozen men are under arrest, and a certain ambassador's been recalled to his country. You've done a fine thing, though you'll get no medals for it." Holmes shrugged, uninterested in accolades. The work is its own reward. "Lestrade, what of Ashbourne?" "Locked up tight," Lestrade replied, though he's still ranting about his eternal order. "We've rounded up most of his lieutenant's veins, singing like a canary, hoping for leniency. The order's finished, thanks to you." Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. "And the mirror?" "Back with Miss Carroway," Lestrade said. "She's had it cleaned and stored. Says she never look at it the same. Can't say I blame her." After Lestrade departed, Holmes returned to the window, his pipe relit. "The mirror is harmless now, Watson, a mere object of glass and wood, yet it served its purpose, drawing us into the heart of a conspiracy. Every case begins with a reflection, a glimpse of truth distorted by lies. Our task is to see clearly." I smiled, picking up my pen once more. "And you do, Holmes, better than any man alive. But I'll confess, when I look in a mirror now, I half expect to see those glowing eyes." He laughed, a low, warm sound that eased the lingering tension. "Then look to the light, Watson, not the shadow. The eyes were but a trick, and we have banished them." As night fell, the fog pressed close to our windows, its tendrils a reminder of the mysteries that still lurked beyond our reach. I resumed my writing, determined to capture the essence of our adventure, the fear, the chase, the triumph of reason over deception. The case of the haunted mirror, as the papers called it, was no ghost story, but a testament to Holmes's unyielding pursuit of truth. Yet as I wrote, I could not shake a final reflection. The order was broken. Its Magister caged, but the world was vast, and shadows were many. Holmes, sensing my mood, turned from the window, his eyes bright with the promise of future battles. "Let the shadows come, Watson," he said. "We shall meet them, and they shall fall." I nodded, my pen moving swiftly, the firelight casting our own reflections on the wall, a doctor and a detective, guardians of the light in a city of fog and secrets. Chapter 14. Epilogue. The autumn of 1889 drew to a close, with London still cloaked in its familiar fog, a veil that seemed to soften the sharp edges of the city's secrets. At 221B Baker Street, the quiet that followed our unraveling of the order of the Saffron Veil was a welcome respite, though it carried the weight of reflection on a case that had tested even Sherlock Holmes's formidable intellect. I, Dr. John Watson, sat by the fire, my journal complete, its pages filled with the tale of the shadow in the mirror story that began with a frightened young woman and ended with the exposure of a treasonous conspiracy. The newspapers, hungry for sensation, dubbed it the case of the haunted mirror, spinning tales of spectral apparitions and occult mysteries. But the truth, as Holmes would have it, was far more grounded, rooted in human ambition and cunning. Holmes himself was restless, as he always was when a case concluded. He stood at the window, his violin tucked under his chin, its notes a mournful counterpoint to the fog's silent drift. The mirror, returned to Miss Eliza Carroway and stripped of its mechanical deceptions, no longer haunted her Kensington home. The manifesto and documents, safely in the hands of the Foreign Office, had set in motion a quiet purge of traitors, their names whispered only in the shadowed halls of Whitehall. Lord Reginald Ashbourne, the Magister, faced trial in secrecy. His dreams of dominion shattered by Holmes's relentless pursuit. As I closed my journal, Holmes set down his violin, his grey eyes meeting mine with a glint of amusement. "You have immortalized our adventure, Watson," he said, lighting his pipe. "But I trust you've kept the Foreign Office's secrets. The public prefers its ghosts to its traitors." I smiled, warmed by the fire and his rare levity. "I've kept to the essentials, Holmes. The shadow, the chase, the triumph of mention of coups or foreign gold. The papers have enough to feed their readers' imaginations." He nodded, exhaling a plume of smoke. "Good. Let them have their haunted mirror. The truth is a sharper blade, and we have wielded it well. Ashbourne's order is broken, its followers scattered, and Miss Carroway is free of her fear. That is enough." I thought of Miss Carroway, her gratitude a bright spot in the case's darkness. She had written to us a brief note of thanks, enclosing a small Tacona silver locket that had belonged to her father, a gesture of closure for his troubled legacy. "She's stronger than she knew," I said, "to face such terror and emerge whole." Holmes's expression softened, a rare glimpse of sentiment. "Strength is often forged in fear, Watson. Carroway's folly led to his death, but his daughter's courage aided our victory. She was no mere victim." He moved to the table, where the brass key with its saffron flower etching lay, a final relic of the case. "This key," he said, turning it in his fingers, unlocked more than a vault. It opened a window to the greed and hubris that drive men to betrayal. Carroway hid it well, knowing its power. I leaned forward, my thoughts drifting to the case's many twists, the glowing eyes in the mirror, the fogbound chased through London, the mirrored chamber in Sussex. "It's a tale unlike any other Holmes," I said. "The mirror was a deception, yet it led us to a truth that might have shaken the nation." He chuckled, setting the key down. "Every case is a mirror, Watson, reflecting the flaws of those who weave it. Ashbourne saw power in shadows, but we saw through them. Reason is our light, and it never fails." A knock at the door heralded Inspector Lestrade, his ferret-like features creased with a grin. "Holmes, Watson," he said, stepping inside. "Just a courtesy call. The Foreign Office is singing your praises quietly, mind you. They've nabbed 3 more of Ashbourne's men, thanks to those documents. The ambassador's gone, too. Recalled in disgrace." Holmes raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by official gratitude, and Ashbourne himself, "Talking, at last," Lestrade said. "Claims the order was his alone, no higher power. I reckon he's protecting someone, but we've no proof. The case is closed, as far as the Yard's concerned." Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. "Closed, perhaps, but shadows linger. Keep your eyes open, Lestrade. The order may be broken, but ambition is eternal." Lestrade departed, leaving us to the fire's glow and the fog's embrace. I returned to my journal, adding a final note. The case was a triumph, not of superstition, but of logic, a testament to Holmes's unyielding pursuit of truth. Yet Ashbourne's words, his claim of the orders, eternity gnawed at me. A reminder that even the brightest light casts shadows. Holmes, sensing my mood, took up his violin once more, its notes soaring into a brighter melody. "Write your tale, Watson," he said, his eyes gleaming. "Let it be a beacon for those who fear the dark. We have faced the shadow and prevailed." I smiled, my pen moving swiftly, the firelight warm against the chill of the night. The case of the haunted mirror was no ghost story, but a chronicle, of human folly and the relentless clarity of Sherlock Holmes. As the fog pressed close to our windows, I felt a quiet certainty. Whatever shadows might rise, Holmes would meet them, and I would be at his side, ready to face the next reflection in the mirror of truth.